From the heights of exhilarating emotions to the depths of a heart-wrenching finale, this narrative resonates with the echoes of classic tragedy, yet it isn't a tale of Romeo and Juliet. It's a stark reminder of how fleeting life can be, especially for those whose brilliance seems destined to shine for decades. Why is it that some individuals, overflowing with talent, ambition, kindness, and hope, are destined to leave us so suddenly? Their departure, whether by illness, accident, or unimaginable violence, is a cruel juxtaposition against the vivid, purposeful lives they led. For Jimmy and Peter James, this devastating reality became their unbearable truth. They were forced to endure the unthinkable, the loss of their beloved daughter, a radiant soul whose light was extinguished not by chance, but by an act so heinous it defies comprehension. This story is not just a tragedy. It's a chilling nightmare, a dark reminder of how the shadows of cruelty can creep into even the brightest lives, leaving behind unanswered questions and a silence that screams of injustice. October 26, 2023, began like any ordinary day but quickly unraveled into one of unspeakable shock and despair. Around 4:30 a.m., an email from the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School startled parents awake. It announced an abrupt closure of the institution due to a critical incident. Parents, already anxious about what such a cryptic phrase could mean, received another email 2 hours later. This update attempted to alleviate fears by clarifying that no students were directly involved. Yet, the ominous tone lingered. For students sitting their final exams, life carried on as normal, adding to the confusion. Despite the assurances, the school soon opened a support center to provide assistance to those in difficult situations. This move underscored the gravity of what had transpired. The nature of the critical incident remained shrouded in secrecy until forensic teams began their grim investigation. On Thursday and Friday, the school grounds were meticulously combed for evidence. Access to the gymnasium and its adjacent facilities was restricted, fueling speculation. Meanwhile, whispers of a tragic event involving an unknown individual spread through the community. It wasn't until later that the shocking truth emerged. A young woman's body had been discovered in the gym showers, her life violently taken. The identity of the victim would soon make this incident all the more harrowing. The events leading to this grim revelation were as chilling as the outcome. Around midnight on October 25th, a gruesome scene greeted the night guard on his rounds. In the gymnasium showers lay the body of a 20-year-old woman, her face unrecognizable and her head shattered. Blood pooled beneath her, evidence of the violence she had endured. Investigators later identified her as Lily James, a promising young water polo coach, last seen alive at 7 p.m. Surveillance footage confirmed her entering the gym, followed closely by a shadowy figure at around 8 p.m. This unknown individual was seen leaving alone shortly thereafter. Lily James was a child of the ocean, born into a world where the sun kissed the waves of Sans Souci, a serene coastal town in New South Wales, Australia. Her life began in May 2002, and from her earliest days, her presence brought joy and light to everyone who knew her. As the first child of Jimmy and Peter James, Lily's arrival marked the start of a new chapter for the family. Her parents, deeply committed to nurturing their daughter's potential, celebrated her milestones with unwavering pride and affection. Her younger brother, Max, who arrived a few years later, idolized her, and the bond they shared became a cornerstone of her life. The town's picturesque beaches and laid-back lifestyle offered a sanctuary where Lily's natural talents and boundless energy could flourish. Days were spent by the sea, building sandcastles with Max or splashing in the cool blue waves. Her grandmother, Barbara, played a pivotal role in these formative years, often regaling Lily with tales from her own youth. Barbara's wisdom, coupled with her unwavering encouragement, instilled in Lily a sense of confidence that would serve her well in the years to come. From an early age, Lily exhibited a rare combination of determination and kindness. She was the kind of child who could captivate an audience with a story one moment and dive headfirst into a challenge the next. Her natural athleticism became evident as soon as she took her first swimming lesson. Unlike many children who fear the water, Lily embraced it with open arms, as if the ocean were an extension of herself. Her father, Jimmy, a water polo coach at a prestigious Anglican girls' school, quickly recognized her potential. Under his guidance, Lily developed a love for swimming that would become one of her defining passions. Swimming wasn't just a sport for Lily. It was a way of life. By the time she was 10, she was already competing in local swimming meets, often coming home with medals that adorned her bedroom walls. Yet, her competitive spirit was always tempered by humility. While others might have boasted about their victories, Lily remained focused on improving herself and supporting her teammates. Her coaches often remarked on her ability to motivate others, a quality that set her apart even at a young age. But sports weren't Lily's only talent. She possessed a creative spark that shone just as brightly as her athletic abilities. Her parents often found her performing impromptu plays in the living room, using bedsheets as costumes and enlisting Max as her co-star. This love for drama blossomed during her school years, where she joined the theater club and quickly became a standout performer. Whether it was a Shakespearean monologue or a comedic skit, Lily had an uncanny ability to hold an audience in the palm of her hand. Her most memorable performance came in 2017 at the prestigious Woodford Folk Festival. Competing against seasoned actors, Lily performed Lady Macbeth's iconic monologue from Macbeth, her voice echoing with emotion and intensity. The audience erupted in applause, and the judges awarded her second place, a remarkable achievement for a 15-year-old. This moment solidified her reputation as a multi-talented individual who excelled in both the arts and sports. Academically, Lily was equally impressive. Her teachers often described her as a perfect student, someone who balanced her extracurricular activities with top-notch grades. She had an innate curiosity that drove her to excel in subjects ranging from mathematics to literature. But what truly set her apart was her compassion. She frequently tutored classmates who were struggling, often staying after school to ensure they understood the material. Her peers admired her not just for her achievements, but for her willingness to uplift others. As Lily grew older, her interests began to converge. She realized that her love for sports, particularly water polo, could pave the way for a fulfilling career. By her senior year of high school, she had decided to pursue a degree in sports business management. Her goal was clear: to combine her passion for athletics with her knack for leadership, ultimately creating opportunities for others to thrive in the sports world. Her family celebrated every step of her journey with enthusiasm. They were her biggest cheerleaders, attending every swimming meet, theater performance, and school awards ceremony. For her parents, Lily's achievements were a testament to the values they had instilled in her: hard work, kindness, and resilience. For Max, she was a role model, someone who proved that dreams could be achieved with determination and heart. By the time she turned 18, Lily had become a fixture in her community. She was the girl everyone admired, the star athlete, the talented performer, and the compassionate friend. Yet, despite her many accolades, she remained grounded, always taking time to thank those who supported her. St. Andrew's Cathedral School, nestled in the bustling heart of Sydney, was not just a place of education, but a community where tradition met ambition. Its towering Gothic architecture stood as a testament to its rich history, blending old-world charm with modern facilities. For decades, the school had been a beacon of excellence, producing alumni who excelled in fields ranging from academia to the arts. Lily James, with her boundless energy and passion for both sports and teaching, seemed tailor-made for such an institution. Her arrival in early 2021 marked the beginning of a journey that would intertwine her fate with the school's legacy in both inspiring and tragic ways. When Lily joined St. Andrews as a water polo coach, she brought with her a fresh perspective that resonated deeply with her students. Her youth and enthusiasm set her apart from more seasoned staff members, making her a relatable figure for the teenagers she mentored. But it wasn't just her age that endeared her to her students. It was her genuine interest in their growth. Lily believed that sports were more than just competition. They were a means to build character, foster teamwork, and instill discipline. Her training sessions were a mix of rigorous drills and heartfelt encouragement. Effort matters more than talent, she would often tell her students, emphasizing the importance of perseverance. Under her guidance, the water polo team began to flourish, not just in terms of performance, but also in camaraderie. Lily had a knack for spotting potential and nurturing it. Whether it was a shy student hesitant to join the team or a talented player struggling with confidence, she made it her mission to bring out the best in everyone. Her impact extended beyond the pool. As a mentor, Lily became a confidant for many students. They admired her not just for her coaching skills, but for her ability to listen without judgment. For those navigating the complexities of adolescence, Lily's empathy and guidance were invaluable. She encouraged her students to dream big and never shy away from challenges, lessons they carried with them long after the final whistle blew. Lily's vibrant personality wasn't confined to her interactions with students. She quickly formed strong relationships with her colleagues in the school administration. Her colleagues appreciated her collaborative spirit and willingness to pitch in whenever needed. Whether it was organizing a school event or covering for a colleague, Lily was always ready to step up. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed, and she soon became a valued member of the staff. The administration, too, recognized her potential. In her short time at the school, Lily proposed innovative ideas for improving the sports program. She suggested workshops on mental health for student athletes, arguing that physical fitness should go hand in hand with emotional well-being. These initiatives earned her respect and positioned her as a forward-thinking leader in the school community. Lily's typical day at St. Andrews was a whirlwind of activity. She would start her mornings with an energizing swim, often using the quiet hours before school to clear her mind and plan her day. Her first sessions were usually theory-based, where she taught her team about strategies and techniques. After lunch, she would dive into practical training sessions, pushing her students to test their limits in the pool. Even after official practice ended, Lily's day was far from over. She often stayed late to help students with assignments or provide extra coaching to those preparing for competitions. For her, the school wasn't just a workplace. It was a space where she could make a meaningful difference. Her dedication was evident to anyone who crossed her path. Despite her success, Lily faced her share of challenges. Balancing her responsibilities as a coach with her studies at Sydney Technological University required meticulous time management. There were days when the weight of expectations felt overwhelming, but Lily never let it show. She approached every task with the same determination that had defined her since childhood. Her professional life, however, wasn't without its complications. The close-knit nature of the school meant that personal boundaries could sometimes blur. While most of her interactions with students and colleagues were positive, navigating these relationships required care and discretion. Lily, ever mindful of her role, made it a point to keep her personal and professional lives separate, a boundary that would later become a source of tension. When Lily James and Paul Tyson first met, neither could have foreseen the profound impact they would have on each other's lives. Both were young, ambitious, and deeply passionate about sports, a shared passion that initially drew them together. Their first meeting was casual, taking place in the staff lounge during a break between coaching sessions. Paul, always one to make an impression, introduced himself with his characteristic charm. He was well-spoken and had a knack for storytelling, effortlessly drawing people into his world. Lily, initially guarded, was drawn to his self-assurance and the ease with which he carried himself. Their shared experiences as coaches and their love for sports gave them plenty to talk about, and a friendship quickly blossomed. Paul's background intrigued Lily. Born in the Netherlands, he had moved to Australia as a teenager, bringing with him an air of worldliness that set him apart. His stories of his childhood in Europe and his transition to life in Australia fascinated her. In turn, Lily shared her own journey. Growing up by the sea, her love for water polo, and her dreams of making a difference through sports. Their conversations were filled with laughter and a growing sense of mutual admiration. It was during a school event that their relationship took a more personal turn. Both were tasked with organizing an inter-school sports day, a responsibility that required them to work closely together. Over the course of several weeks, their interactions became more frequent and increasingly personal. Paul's wit and attentiveness impressed Lily, while her warmth and authenticity captivated him. By the time the event concluded, there was an undeniable spark between them. Their first date was an impromptu affair. Paul, spotting Lily in a local cafe one afternoon, invited her to join him. What began as a casual chat turned into an hours-long conversation filled with shared dreams and playful banter. By the end of the evening, it was clear to both that this was more than just friendship. They decided to see each other again, this time intentionally planning a date. A simple dinner at a quiet restaurant solidified their growing bond, and the two began what seemed to be a promising relationship. From the outset, both Lily and Paul knew that their relationship needed to remain discreet. St. Andrew's Cathedral School, while progressive in many ways, had strict policies regarding staff relationships. For Lily, who prided herself on maintaining a professional image, the secrecy was both a necessity and a burden. She cherished the moments she and Paul shared outside of work, walks in the park, movie nights, and quiet dinners. But the need to keep their connection hidden often weighed on her. Paul, on the other hand, found the secrecy thrilling. For him, the covert nature of their relationship added an element of excitement. Yet this difference in perspective sometimes created tension. While Lily saw their discretion as a means of protecting their careers and reputations, Paul occasionally viewed it as an unnecessary constraint. This divergence, though subtle at first, hinted at deeper differences in their personalities and priorities. Despite their efforts to keep their relationship private, rumors began to circulate among their colleagues. The close-knit nature of the school made it nearly impossible to hide completely, and their occasional shared glances or moments of closeness did not go unnoticed. Initially, the whispers were harmless, speculation about whether the two coaches were spending time together outside of work. But as the rumors grew, so did the scrutiny. The turning point came when Paul, in a moment of misplaced confidence, confided in a colleague about their relationship. His intent was not malicious. He saw it as a way to share his happiness. However, the information quickly spread, and soon, their private lives became a topic of public discussion within the school. For Lily, this was a devastating betrayal. She had trusted Paul to honor their agreement to keep their relationship private, and his decision to share their story felt like a violation of that trust. When Lily confronted Paul about the breach, their conversation quickly turned heated. Paul, caught off guard, tried to downplay the significance of his actions. He argued that the relationship was bound to come to light eventually and that the opinions of their colleagues shouldn't matter. But for Lily, the issue was not just about their professional reputations. It was about respect and boundaries. The argument marked the beginning of the end. Though Paul apologized and tried to make amends, the damage had been done. Lily, ever pragmatic, recognized that their relationship was no longer sustainable. She ended things, choosing to focus on her career and personal goals, rather than navigate the complexities of a relationship that had already shown cracks. For her, the decision was painful but necessary. For Paul, the breakup was a blow to both his heart and his ego. He struggled to accept Lily's decision, viewing it not just as the end of a relationship, but as a rejection of him as a person. In the weeks that followed, he tried repeatedly to win her back, sending flowers, writing letters, and attempting to rekindle their connection. But Lily, firm in her resolve, remained distant. Paul's inability to let go became increasingly evident. In the months following the end of his relationship with Lily James, Paul Tyson began to experience a psychological decline. While outwardly he continued to function as a coach and colleague at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, inwardly he wrestled with feelings of rejection, humiliation, and anger. Paul had always projected an image of confidence and control. He was the kind of man who drew people in with his charm, inspiring trust and admiration. Yet beneath this polished exterior lay a fragile ego that struggled to cope with failure or rejection. Lily's decision to end their relationship struck at the core of his identity. For Paul, who had always viewed himself as desirable and in control, her rejection was not just personal. It was an affront to the very image he had built of himself. In the weeks that followed the breakup, Paul's colleagues began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. He became more withdrawn, often retreating into his office during breaks rather than joining others in the staff lounge. His usually sharp focus during coaching sessions began to waver, and his once lighthearted interactions with students grew strained. Occasionally, he exhibited bursts of anger, snapping at minor mistakes or perceived slights. While these incidents were dismissed by many as the result of stress, they hinted at the deeper turmoil brewing within him. Paul's fixation on Lily grew with each passing day. He began to monitor her social media profiles obsessively, looking for clues about her life post-breakup. Each new photo or status update became a source of frustration and resentment. If Lily appeared happy or successful, it only deepened his sense of inadequacy. He convinced himself that her happiness was a facade, a deliberate attempt to taunt him. This obsessive behavior extended beyond the digital realm. Paul occasionally drove past places he knew Lily frequented, such as her university or favorite cafes, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. While he never approached her during these instances, the act of physically placing himself in her vicinity gave him a fleeting sense of control. However, these moments were fleeting, and the anger he felt afterward only grew stronger. By mid-2023, Paul's world had narrowed significantly. While he maintained the appearance of normalcy at work, his personal life was marked by increasing isolation. His friendships had dwindled, partly due to his withdrawal and partly because of his inability to discuss anything beyond his grievances about Lily. The few friends who remained began to distance themselves, uncomfortable with his fixation and erratic behavior. Without a support system, Paul's thoughts turned darker. He began to view Lily not as the vibrant and independent person he had once admired, but as a symbol of his perceived failures. In his mind, she became the reason for his unraveling. This shift in perspective marked a dangerous escalation in his behavior. No longer content to passively observe her life from a distance, Paul began to contemplate actions that would force her to acknowledge him. Paul's descent into violence was not an impulsive act. It was the result of weeks of planning and festering anger. In the weeks leading up to the attack, he meticulously prepared, purchasing a hammer from a local hardware store and scouting locations where he might confront Lily. His actions were deliberate and calculated, underscoring the depth of his obsession and the extent to which he had convinced himself that he was justified in taking drastic measures. He rented a car to ensure he could approach the school unnoticed and leave quickly afterward. Surveillance footage later revealed that he had visited St. Andrews on several occasions in the days leading up to the crime, likely to familiarize himself with the school's layout and identify the best time to approach Lily. These visits, while seemingly innocuous, were chilling precursors to the events that would follow. October 25, 2023, was a day that began like any other at St. Andrew's Cathedral School but ended in horror and tragedy. For Lily James, it was a routine day filled with classes and coaching, a testament to her unwavering commitment to her students and her passion for water polo. For Paul Tyson, however, it marked the culmination of weeks of obsessive planning and an unrelenting descent into darkness. What transpired that day shocked a school community, devastated two families, and left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Lily arrived at St. Andrews that afternoon with her characteristic enthusiasm, ready to coach her team. Her day had been long but fulfilling, balancing her university commitments with her role as a mentor. She had no reason to suspect that her life was about to take a tragic turn. After the training session, she decided to freshen up in the gym showers, a routine end to a productive day. Unbeknownst to her, Paul had been watching from a distance, waiting for the opportune moment to confront her. His rented silver Lexus was parked discreetly nearby, a calculated choice that would allow him to blend into the bustling streets of Sydney. Paul's demeanor that day was calm but focused, his every move deliberate as he carried out his plan. He entered the gym shortly after Lily, concealing the hammer he had brought with him under his jacket. What happened next unfolded in a matter of minutes, but left scars that would last a lifetime. Surveillance cameras captured Paul entering the shower area, and though there were no direct witnesses to the confrontation, the evidence painted a chilling picture. Inside, an argument quickly escalated. Witnesses later reported hearing raised voices, though the exact words exchanged remain unknown. As tensions escalated, Paul attacked her with the hammer, delivering a fatal blow to her head. The pathologists later confirmed that her death was instantaneous, sparing her any prolonged suffering. The horrific scene was discovered later that evening by the school's night guard. While making his usual rounds, he entered the gym and found a lifeless body in a pool of blood. The woman's face and head were so badly disfigured that it was difficult to recognize her as the once beloved Lily James. Overwhelmed by shock and horror, he immediately called emergency services, his voice trembling as he described the scene. The first responders, though trained to handle crises, were visibly shaken by the brutality of the attack. Detectives were called to the scene, and the area was cordoned off as a crime scene. Forensic teams began their meticulous work, gathering evidence that would later prove crucial in piecing together the events of the day. The discovery of Lily's body marked the beginning of a large-scale investigation, which quickly turned into a search for the perpetrator. When authorities identified Paul as a suspect, their immediate priority became locating him. By October 26th, police helicopters and marine units were combing the coastline near Diamond Bay, but the search yielded no results. The days following the tragedy were marked by shock, grief, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The school, a place that had always been a sanctuary for learning and growth, was now at the center of a horrific crime. Classes were canceled, and the gym was sealed off as investigators continued their work. Parents, students, and staff grappled with the unimaginable reality that one of their own had committed such an act. The administration moved quickly to address the situation. A counseling center was set up in the school library, providing round-the-clock support to those affected by the tragedy. The principal issued a statement assuring parents that every measure would be taken to ensure the safety of students and staff. However, the reassurances did little to quell the unease that permeated the community. Renowned forensic psychologist Tim Watson Monroe was invited to speak at the school, offering insights into the psychology behind the tragedy. He described Paul as a textbook example of a narcissistic individual whose inability to process rejection led to catastrophic consequences. Monroe's analysis shed light on the behaviors and warning signs that might have gone unnoticed, such as Paul's increasing isolation, erratic behavior, and obsessive tendencies. Paul's actions in the immediate aftermath of the attack revealed the cold calculation behind his violence. He waited for an hour before leaving the gym, likely to ensure that no one would witness his departure. He collected Lily's belongings, placing them in a backpack, and exited the school. After leaving the school, Paul's actions suggested a mix of calculation and inner turmoil. He drove to Diamond Bay Reserve, a picturesque yet infamous location known for its cliffs and history of suicides. There, he disposed of the murder weapon in a garbage container, ensuring that no immediate evidence would tie him to the crime. He then parked his car near the rocks. Witnesses at Diamond Bay reported hearing fragmented arguments, as though Paul were speaking to himself. At around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a cryptic message to her parents. The text, though brief, likely served as a means of ensuring that Lily's body would be discovered quickly. This act, whether motivated by regret or a twisted sense of closure, added another layer of complexity to an already devastating situation. Paul's subsequent actions suggested an internal conflict. He made a brief emergency call, only to hang up before providing any details. This hesitation hinted at a flicker of doubt or remorse, a moment when he may have considered seeking help. Ultimately, however, his path was set. It was his last known action before he stepped off the cliffs, plunging to his death in the cold, dark waters below. It wasn't until the following morning, on October 27, that his body was found washed onto the rocks of Diamond Bay Reserve. The grim discovery brought a sense of closure but also underscored the tragic finality of the events. Forensic analysis confirmed that Paul was responsible for Lily's death, but his suicide meant he could never be held accountable in a court of law. The criminal case was closed, leaving both families to grapple with the consequences. For the James family, the loss was immeasurable. Lily, a beacon of hope and joy, had been taken from them in the most senseless and violent way imaginable. Her parents, Jimmy and Peter, struggled to reconcile their grief with the public outpouring of support that followed. The Tyson family faced a different kind of torment. Once respected members of their community, they now carried the weight of Paul Tyson's actions. The decision to cremate his body and scatter his ashes in Sydney, rather than repatriate him to the Netherlands, was seen as an attempt to quietly distance themselves from the scandal. Yet for those who knew Paul, his descent into violence was as shocking as it was devastating. Lily's funeral, which took place on November 17, 2023, became tragic in the life of her parents. The ceremony took place at her former school in Hurstville, with over 500 people in attendance. The James family requested that mourners wear bright, vibrant colors rather than traditional black, reflecting Lily's energetic and creative spirit. Friends, family, and colleagues shared heartfelt tributes, recalling her generosity, talent, and infectious positivity. The school administration arranged a live broadcast of the service, allowing those who could not attend in person to pay their respects. At the entrance to the building, students and colleagues created a makeshift memorial adorned with Lily's favorite flowers, farewell letters, and photographs. A video of Lily performing a monologue from Macbeth was played during the service, a testament to her talent and passion for the arts. Paul's story became a cautionary tale, illustrating how unresolved personal issues can escalate into destructive behavior when left unchecked. Ardith Wood was an extraordinary 27-year-old woman whose life embodied an inspiring blend of beauty, intellect, and ambition. Known for her radiant smile and a magnetic presence that lit up every room, Ardith left a lasting impression on everyone she met. Her love for knowledge was insatiable, and her keen intellect shone brightly in every endeavor she pursued. Ardith was immersed in the final stages of a significant personal and professional milestone, earning her doctoral degree in philosophy from the renowned University of Waterloo. Her chosen field, philosophy, was not just an academic pursuit for her, but a lens through which she explored life's deepest questions. She often spoke about how philosophy helped her make sense of the world and inspired others to see its value. Her academic contributions extended beyond her studies. Ardith served as an editor for a prestigious philosophy journal, showcasing her dedication to enriching the discipline and supporting fellow scholars. Her dream of becoming a university professor was within her grasp, and those who knew her never doubted she would make an indelible mark in her field. The future stretched before her, bright and full of promise, reflecting the hard work and passion that defined her journey. The summer of 2003 marked a welcome respite from the pressures of academia. Ardith returned to her hometown of Ottawa, Canada, to spend cherished time with her family. The decision to take this break was driven by her profound love for her parents, siblings, and the city she called home. Ottawa's vibrant summer landscapes became the backdrop for a season filled with laughter, shared meals, and heartfelt conversations. Every moment spent with her family deepened bonds that were already strong, creating memories they would hold dear forever. One sunny August morning, Ardith began her day with one of her favorite rituals, a rejuvenating run through her neighborhood. The fresh morning air and the peaceful ambiance mirrored her own serenity and zest for life. Ardith decided to go on a bike ride to soak in the summer sunshine. Borrowing her brother's bicycle, she promised to return within a few hours. She planned to follow a familiar and beloved trail that wound through dense forests, along winding riverbanks, and up past breathtaking views. Ardith had always appreciated the tranquil beauty of this route, finding solace in the gentle rustle of leaves and the calming sounds of the water. The trail was a favorite among cyclists in the area, offering a sense of escape and a connection to nature that she deeply cherished. As the hours passed, however, Ardith did not return home. The skies darkened, and a sudden downpour drenched the city. Her mother, who had been quietly anticipating Ardith's cheerful return, grew increasingly uneasy. Ardith was responsible and punctual by nature. Surely she would not have stayed out in such weather. When night fell and Ardith still had not returned, her family's concern turned to alarm. Fearing the worst, that she might have been injured or lost along the trail, they launched a desperate search. They retraced every path she might have taken, calling out her name into the night. The woods, so familiar and welcoming earlier, now seemed vast and foreboding. Despite their relentless efforts, Ardith was nowhere to be found. Her family, hearts heavy with worry, contacted the police for assistance as the reality of her absence settled over them. The once joyous summer day had turned into an unimaginable nightmare, leaving those who loved Ardith grasping for answers. The official search began the following morning due to the inclement weather, and it quickly escalated into one of the largest search operations in Ottawa's history. Rescue teams, police officers, dog handlers, and helicopters were deployed, and hundreds of volunteers joined Ardith's family in the search. Flyers bearing her photo were distributed across the city, and her story dominated local news. Despite the massive effort, the first days yielded no significant leads, leaving her family and the community gripped with fear and uncertainty. Then, a breakthrough came from a local resident who recalled a chilling encounter on the day of Ardith's disappearance. She reported seeing a man on the trail behaving suspiciously. He had attempted to push her off her bike and drag her into the bushes. The witness described the man as young, around 25 years old, with light skin, dark hair, a beard, and glasses. Though outwardly well-dressed and pleasant-looking, his demeanor was unsettling. She recounted how other cyclists on the trail had fortunately intervened, allowing her to escape. The incident took place in the Green Creek area, a location that matched the general route Ardith was thought to have taken. This testimony added a dark new dimension to the case, suggesting that Ardith may have encountered the same man. Based on the witness's description, police created a composite sketch of the suspect. When shown to Ardith's family, no one recognized the man, and he remained a mystery. The police opted not to release the sketch publicly, fearing it might lead to false accusations and misdirected efforts. Still, they urged the public to come forward with any information, confident that Ardith's striking appearance and distinctive personality would have left a lasting impression on anyone who had seen her. More leads began to trickle in. 16-year-old Laura contacted the police to report seeing a man who matched the suspect's description acting erratically near the Green Creek Trail. Her tip corroborated the earlier account and strengthened the belief that the suspect might have been involved in Ardith's disappearance. Yet despite these promising leads, days turned into weeks, and the search for Ardith remained agonizingly fruitless. Ardith's disappearance left a profound impact on the community, uniting people in their determination to find her. Volunteers continued to comb through the dense forest trails, search waterways, and post flyers. The Wood family, despite their grief, became a source of inspiration for others, demonstrating resilience and hope even as the odds seemed insurmountable. As the investigation wore on, the case highlighted broader societal concerns about safety, especially for women who venture into public spaces alone. The vibrant young woman who had once radiated optimism and brilliance was now a symbol of the need for vigilance, community action, and justice. Laura, a 16-year-old witness, also gave police chilling details of what she saw on the day Ardith Wood disappeared. As she cycled along the Green Creek Trail, she noticed Ardith sitting on a large rock, seemingly taking a break from her ride. The young woman appeared calm, as if enjoying a moment of rest. Laura continued riding but soon heard a scream that made her stop abruptly. Turning back, she saw Ardith in a heated argument with a man. From a distance, it was hard to discern the exact nature of the interaction. The man didn't appear to be physically aggressive, and Ardith wasn't visibly asking for help. Assuming it might just be a lover's quarrel, Laura hesitated. Her instinct told her something was off, but she brushed it aside, particularly as the sky grew darker with an impending storm. Nervous about the weather and the uneasy scene, she pedaled home quickly. Just as she left, she thought she heard another scream but dismissed it, reasoning it was too late to turn back. When Laura shared her story with the police, they showed her the composite sketch of the suspect. Her heart sank as she recognized the face immediately. She confirmed that it was the same man she had seen with Ardith that day. The encounter had taken place around 1 p.m. in the Green Creek area, the very spot that had become the focal point of the search. Laura's account was corroborated by other women who came forward after seeing news of Ardith's disappearance. These women described encountering a similar man on the trail, someone who exuded charm but whose behavior quickly turned alarming. Each time, the encounters ended in attempted attacks, with the women narrowly escaping. One woman described how the man had grabbed her during a walk. At first, he seemed friendly, even flirtatious, but his demeanor shifted drastically. Acting on pure adrenaline, she managed to fend him off with her bicycle and flee without looking back, fearing he might give chase. Curiously, none of these women had reported their experiences to the police until Ardith's case made headlines. The reasons varied: fear of not being believed, shame, or simply wanting to put the unsettling encounters behind them. However, their testimonies painted a picture of a predator who targeted women in isolated areas, often on the pretense of casual conversation before turning violent. The similarities in their descriptions and locations helped the police narrow their search further. Soon, they found Ardith's bicycle abandoned near Green Creek. This discovery marked a breakthrough, confirming they were on the right track. Then came a chilling phone call that shifted the investigation into high gear. A man, refusing to identify himself, called the police to confess that he had been involved in a terrible accident in the forest. Speaking with a shaky voice, the caller claimed he had not meant to harm Ardith or take her life, but panicked after the incident. He admitted to disposing of her body by carrying her across the creek, digging a shallow grave, and covering it with branches. Before the police could gather more information, the caller abruptly hung up. The police traced the call to a phone booth 20 minutes outside Ottawa. Officers rushed to the scene, hoping to find clues, a witness, fingerprints, or DNA, but were met with disappointment. The handset had been meticulously wiped clean, and there were no security cameras or bystanders to provide additional leads. Despite the frustrating lack of physical evidence, the search for Ardith intensified around Green Creek. Specialized cadaver dogs were brought in to comb the dense forest. Days later, the dogs led investigators to a grim discovery. Nestled between two trees in a quiet, secluded area, they found a shallow grave. Ardith's body, hastily buried and partially exposed, lay beneath a cover of broken branches. The scene suggested the perpetrator had been interrupted, leaving the burial incomplete. Detectives carefully examined the area for evidence, but the site yielded no fingerprints, DNA, or other forensic clues. Ardith's body was sent to the medical examiner, who confirmed her identity and provided harrowing details about her final moments. The autopsy revealed that Ardith had suffered a horrific and prolonged death. Contrary to the caller's claims of an accident, the evidence suggested deliberate violence. The cause of death was drowning. Algae were found in her lungs, indicating she was alive when submerged in water. Though her body was found partially naked, forensic experts found no obvious signs of sexual assault. However, they could not rule it out entirely. The police, suspecting a sexually motivated crime, theorized that the killer's primary intent was to harm women and possibly assault them. Ardith's murder seemed to be the culmination of escalating predatory behavior, raising the stakes for law enforcement to apprehend the perpetrator before he struck again. As investigators worked tirelessly to identify the suspect, they faced mounting pressure from the public and media. Recognizing the urgency, the police released the composite sketch of the man believed to be responsible. It was a calculated risk, as they feared the influx of false leads could hinder the investigation. Still, the decision proved pivotal. Within days, the tip line was flooded with over 4,000 calls, each offering potential clues about the suspect's identity. Processing this volume of information was a Herculean task, but the flood of public involvement renewed hope. On September 10, the investigation into Ardith Wood's murder took a significant turn when the police released a crucial detail about the suspect. Witnesses who had seen the mysterious man in the forest recalled noticing a distinctive eagle tattoo on his left shoulder. This seemingly small detail became a critical lead, one that investigators and the media hoped would finally unearth the perpetrator. The police collaborated with sketch artists to create a depiction of the tattoo, which was widely disseminated through news outlets. The response was immediate, with several tips pouring in from the public. Callers reported acquaintances with bird tattoos on various parts of their bodies, faces, necks, backs, but none of these leads led anywhere significant. Months of frustration passed until April 2004, when a new lead emerged from yet another tip. A caller claimed he knew the man responsible for Ardith's death, identifying him as someone who lived in the area and frequented the Green Creek Trail on a bicycle around the time of the murder. Investigators took the tip seriously and invited the individual named by the caller for questioning. When the suspect arrived at the police station, the detectives were struck by how closely he resembled the composite sketch. Light-skinned, dark-haired, with a beard, and matching the reported age. The man's demeanor added to their suspicions. He appeared visibly nervous during the conversation, stumbling over his words and avoiding direct eye contact. When detectives asked him to show his left shoulder, they found an eagle tattoo precisely where witnesses had described it. Their suspicions deepened when they learned the man had a prior criminal record, including incidents of aggression. He was immediately placed at the center of the investigation and subjected to a 3-hour interrogation. The suspect, however, remained defiant and evasive. At one point, he described himself cryptically, saying, "I'm like a scorpion under a rock. You never know what I'm going to do." When questioned about his whereabouts on August 6, 2003, the man faltered. He had no alibi and could not account for his movements that day, though he vehemently denied any involvement in Ardith's murder. Despite their suspicions, the police lacked concrete evidence linking the man to the crime. He agreed to a polygraph test and surprisingly passed it with ease. This left the investigators in a quandary. Without physical evidence or a confession, they had no choice but to release the suspect, though they placed him under discreet surveillance. Over the next few weeks, the police continued gathering information and invited the man back for further questioning. However, he insisted on his innocence, and the investigation reached a dead end. In a desperate attempt to revive the case, the Ottawa police announced a reward of $50,000 for any information that could lead to an arrest, an unprecedented amount for a case like this. The announcement generated an overwhelming response, with nearly 5,000 tips flooding in. Among them was a name that piqued the detectives' interest: Christopher Myers. A 25-year-old with a history of minor drug offenses, Myers worked as a janitor and was described by acquaintances as quiet and unassuming. Yet his physical appearance closely matched the composite sketch, including the distinctive beard. As detectives dug into Myers' background, their hopes rose. However, a major hurdle soon emerged. Myers had an alibi for the day of Ardith's disappearance. His landlady claimed he had been at home that morning and had left for his restaurant job shortly afterward. The police were puzzled by how she could recall the day so vividly, given that it was nearly a year earlier. Furthermore, Myers did not have an eagle tattoo on his shoulder, a fact that directly contradicted witness accounts. Detectives speculated that Myers might have had the tattoo removed, though they had no evidence to confirm this. Despite their instincts telling them Myers was the right man, they lacked the proof to arrest him. The case took a chilling and unexpected turn several weeks later, when authorities received a report of another attack in the area. This time, however, the victim survived. The incident involved a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to Ardith, her features uncannily similar enough to make anyone wonder if the attacker had deliberately chosen her. One evening, she was walking alone across the bridge. At first, it was an ordinary walk, one she had taken many times before to clear her mind and enjoy the solitude. As she crossed the midpoint of the bridge, she became aware of a presence behind her. Glancing back, she saw a man on a bicycle slowly approaching. He appeared unassuming, even attractive, with an air of confidence that might have seemed friendly in another context. Initially, she brushed off her unease, assuming he was just another passerby enjoying the evening as she was. But as his pace synchronized with hers and he began drawing closer, her unease deepened. When he started attempting to engage her in conversation, his tone overly familiar for a stranger, alarm bells began ringing in her mind. He asked innocuous questions at first, like if she often walked here or if she lived nearby. She answered curtly, hoping her disinterest would dissuade him, but he persisted, his questions becoming subtly invasive. It was then she noticed his eyes, fixed on her in a way that felt predatory. She quickened her pace, her heart beating faster, but he kept up with her, the wheels of his bike rolling eerily quietly behind her. His persistence became unnerving, and his friendly demeanor took on a darker edge as he leaned slightly forward on his handlebars, as if to close the distance between them. At that moment, her instinct screamed at her to act. Turning sharply to face him, she met his gaze with a firm and unwavering stare. In a steady voice, she told him to leave her alone, her words clear and deliberate. For a brief moment, he hesitated, his expression unreadable. Then, with a grin that sent shivers down her spine, the man did not relent. The man rode past her, and as the young woman breathed a sigh of relief, she noticed something unsettling. The cyclist had turned his bike around and was now racing directly toward her. Panic gripped her as she realized she was entirely alone, with no one nearby to come to her aid. Before she could act, the attacker leaped off his bicycle and grabbed her forcefully, dragging her into the dense bushes. Desperately, she screamed for help, the sound piercing the silence of the isolated path. Her cries seemed to startle the man, who abruptly released her and fled. Though she managed to escape unharmed, the incident left her shaken. She reported the encounter to the authorities, recounting every detail she could remember about the man. The way he looked, his demeanor, and the strange mixture of charm and menace he exuded. Her account matched the earlier reports about Ardith's alleged killer, down to the unsettling charm and predatory persistence. The survivor's courage in reporting the incident added a crucial piece to the puzzle, but it also deepened the mystery. Investigators could not ignore the parallels between her story and Ardith's case. The similarities were unsettling. The location, the profile of the attacker, and even the uncanny resemblance between the two women. The bridge, once a tranquil pathway for evening strolls, now became a symbol of fear and unresolved questions. Who was this man? Was he connected to Ardith's disappearance? These questions hung in the air, their weight pressing down on the investigators and the community alike. This incident reignited public fear and placed enormous pressure on law enforcement. The investigators doubled their efforts, revisiting every lead and re-interviewing witnesses. Despite their determination, the lack of physical evidence remained a frustrating obstacle. The case had become a symbol of both hope and despair, drawing attention from across the country. Ardith's family, though devastated, refused to give up, working tirelessly to keep her memory alive and urging anyone with information to come forward. In May of the following year, the community was shaken once again by another terrifying attack that bore eerie similarities to the events surrounding Ardith's disappearance. This time, the victim was a tall, blonde woman whose features were strikingly similar to Ardith's, adding to the unsettling sense that these incidents might be linked. She had spent the evening at a lively party, enjoying the company of friends and the carefree atmosphere of spring. As the night wore on, she decided to walk home alone through the park, a choice that, though seemingly safe in the quiet neighborhood, would soon lead to a harrowing ordeal. The park was nearly deserted, illuminated only by the occasional street lamp, which cast long, eerie shadows across the winding paths. She walked briskly, her heels clicking against the ground, when she noticed a man approaching from the opposite direction. His demeanor seemed casual, almost friendly, as he greeted her and attempted to strike up a conversation. Politely but firmly, she told him she was in a hurry and asked to be left alone. For a moment, he hesitated, then feigned helplessness, claiming to be lost and asking for directions. Reluctantly, she stopped and gave him brief instructions, her instincts urging her to keep the interaction short. Hoping this would satisfy him, she quickly resumed her walk. As she turned the corner into a quieter area, she felt relief wash over her as she thought the encounter was behind her. But that relief was short-lived. Just minutes later, as she passed a line of tall bushes bordering the sidewalk, the man reappeared, stepping out from the shadows with a predatory intensity. Before she could react, he lunged at her, grabbing her neck with both hands and attempting to strangle her. The attack was brutal and merciless, the man's rage bursting forth as if from some dark, hidden monster. The woman fought back with every ounce of strength she could summon. She clawed at his hands, kicked furiously, and screamed at the top of her lungs. When his grip tightened, she sank her teeth into his arm, desperate to break free. Her screams echoed, breaking the silence of the night. The sudden appearance of witnesses jolted the attacker. Startled and panicked, he released the woman and bolted, disappearing into the night. In his haste to escape, however, he made a critical mistake. He dropped his phone. Authorities quickly recovered it, and its contents provided crucial clues that would deepen the mystery surrounding the attacker's identity and possible connection to other crimes. The woman, though shaken and bruised, survived the ordeal. Her courageous resistance and the swift intervention of the community not only saved her life, but also brought a glimmer of hope to the ongoing investigation. This incident, while horrifying, added a new layer of intrigue and urgency to the case. When investigators retrieved the device, they discovered that it belonged to Christopher Mears, a suspect they had previously connected to Ardith's murder case. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Mears had been implicated in a series of attacks, all targeting young blonde women with similar appearances. These patterns confirmed the police's suspicions that Christopher had been involved in a string of assaults, possibly including the murder of Ardith. Christopher was brought in for questioning, but he remained adamant about his innocence. He denied ever visiting Green Creek, having any connection to Ardith, or being involved in the other attacks. He admitted to struggling with mental health issues, including uncontrollable aggression, but claimed he had never caused serious physical harm to anyone. His demeanor during questioning alternated between feigned calm and visible irritation, frustrating the detectives. They observed that his crooked teeth matched a feature reported by some victims and persuaded him to take a polygraph test. The polygraph session lasted 5 grueling hours, and Christopher failed it spectacularly. Despite this, he continued to assert his innocence, dismissing the test results as inaccurate. Legally, the results could not be used as definitive evidence, leaving the investigators in a bind. Without hard proof, they had no choice but to release Christopher. However, they remained resolute in their determination to build a case against him. Over the next 5 months, detectives meticulously gathered evidence, interviewing everyone connected to Christopher, from relatives to former colleagues and an ex-girlfriend. The investigation revealed a harrowing portrait of Christopher's troubled past. Born into a dysfunctional family plagued by alcoholism, he had endured a chaotic childhood marked by neglect and abuse. Diagnosed with several mental disorders, including attention deficit disorder and schizophrenia, Christopher was removed from his biological parents and placed in foster care. Although his adoptive parents showed him love and patience, they struggled to manage his erratic behavior. Unable to cope, they returned him to the orphanage when he turned 12. As Christopher entered adulthood, he appeared to function as an ordinary young man. He graduated from high school, enrolled in university, and even developed a circle of friends. However, those who knew him closely described him as deeply unsettling. His university roommate recounted bizarre and frightening stories Christopher shared, which eventually led her to evict him from their shared space. His ex-girlfriend provided further insight into his personality, revealing his love for cycling along Ottawa's trails and his fascination with the picturesque landscapes. But she also disclosed a curious detail. Christopher had a penchant for temporary tattoos. This revelation opened a new line of inquiry. Witnesses had consistently reported seeing an eagle tattoo on the attacker's shoulder, but Christopher bore no such permanent mark. Investigators speculated that he might have used temporary tattoos to disguise himself, a theory that aligned with his ex-girlfriend's account. It explained why the tattoo description had been so consistent yet remained untraceable in their records. As the detectives pieced together Christopher's history, a chilling narrative emerged. His aggression, combined with a penchant for targeting women who resembled Ardith, painted a picture of a disturbed individual whose violent tendencies had escalated over time. However, without definitive proof linking him to Ardith's murder, the case remained mired in uncertainty. The Ottawa police intensified their efforts, determined to find the evidence they needed to bring justice for Ardith and ensure no more lives would be endangered. For some time, Christopher Mears bore the exact image of an eagle tattooed on his left shoulder, a detail that would eventually become central to the case. When the sketch of the tattoo was shown to the girl who had encountered him, she confirmed without hesitation that it matched what she had seen. This piece of evidence bolstered the case against him, leading investigators to summon Christopher for questioning on October 13, 2005. This time, the interrogation took place in a small, oppressive room, its walls closing in on Christopher both literally and figuratively. The detectives, seasoned and imposing, sat uncomfortably close to him, creating an atmosphere charged with psychological intensity. They began with direct accusations, stating, "We know everything about you, Chris. We know it was you who killed Ardith." At first, Christopher dodged their questions, offering evasive answers. However, as the hours wore on, his resolve crumbled. After 3 hours, his statements shifted from denial to a confused and inconsistent narrative. Christopher admitted he had been in Green Creek on the day of Ardith's disappearance. He claimed he had been struck by her beauty and decided to approach her. Offering compliments and light conversation, he persuaded her to follow him into the woods. Once there, Christopher recounted, he tried to kiss her, but Ardith recoiled in discomfort, rejecting his advances. According to him, she ran away, tripped, and fell into the creek. Christopher alleged he attempted to rescue her but failed, portraying himself as a hero thwarted by circumstance. However, this narrative did not align with his subsequent actions. Rather than seeking help, Christopher admitted to pulling Ardith's body from the creek, undressing her, and burying her in a shallow grave. When the police pressed further, informing him that his actions would lead to murder charges, Christopher suddenly retracted his confession. "No, I never met her," he stammered. "It was a joke. I read all of this in the newspapers." The detectives, frustrated by his strange behavior, decided to show all the evidence that indicated what he had done. This strategy worked. Christopher eventually confessed to killing Ardith. He even drew a map of the Green Creek trails, indicating where he had met her and the approximate location where she had been buried. His map also corroborated the account of 16-year-old Laura, who had seen Ardith with a man that day. On October 20th, 2005, Christopher was formally arrested. However, his erratic behavior continued. When investigators brought him to the crime scene to recreate the events, he suddenly claimed it was not the right location, insisting it had all occurred elsewhere. Despite the inconsistencies, his confession, coupled with corroborating witness statements, provided enough evidence for prosecutors to proceed. Christopher also admitted to other attacks on women, adding additional charges to his case. At his trial, Christopher's defense lawyer painted him as a troubled young man with a history of mental health issues. Initially, Christopher denied his confessions, calling them fabrications influenced by media reports. However, under the guidance of his attorney, he eventually agreed to a plea deal. On January 8, 2008, 5 years after Ardith's murder, Christopher pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and multiple counts of assault. He refused to disclose his motives or further details, leaving many questions unanswered. The prosecution presented a theory that painted Christopher as a predator who had been stalking the Green Creek trails for victims. He had likely targeted Ardith because of her resemblance to his preferred type: tall, blonde, and attractive. When his attempts at conversation failed, he had lured her into the woods under false pretenses. There, the encounter escalated into violence. Ardith, in a desperate bid to escape, had fled toward the creek, only for Christopher to catch up and drown her. Ardith's parents, devastated but resolute, supported the prosecution's version of events. They rejected Christopher's claims of an accident, pointing out that their daughter was an excellent swimmer and would not have drowned without external interference. What haunted them most was the mystery of how Christopher had convinced Ardith to accompany him into the woods, a question that remains unanswered to this day. Christopher was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 10 years. In 2020, he filed for parole, but his request was denied. The commission cited the high risk of him reoffending, particularly against women, as justification for their decision. Ardith's memory lives on in her community. In 2017, a plaque was installed on a centuries-old oak tree in Green Creek Park, commemorating her life and legacy. That same year, during a violent thunderstorm reminiscent of the one on the day of her murder, lightning struck the tree. Experts believed the oak would not survive the damage, but against all odds, it did. The resilient tree continues to grow, standing as a living monument to Ardith, a testament to the strength and beauty of her spirit. On a damp, fog-laden night, she disappeared. One minute, the young woman was completing her usual work routine. The next, she was gone. Her final messages unanswered, her phone and jacket strewn near an alleyway dumpster as if carelessly discarded. The quiet streets held their breath, sensing the first whispers of something dark, something calculated. The community was left in shock, reeling not only from the horrific details but from the loss of trust in those they had once called neighbors, friends. The story of William and Sandra Inman began in 1983 during a church gathering that would set the stage for a lifetime together. Bill, then 18, and Sandra, at only 16, shared a connection rooted in their faith. Their relationship blossomed with the approval of their families, who saw a future for them steeped in tradition and piety. Not long after, the young couple married, settling down in the quiet town of Logan, Ohio. Bill, a builder by trade, took his work seriously, yet he regarded his spiritual duties as his true calling. He volunteered tirelessly at the Evangelical Church of the Tabernacle of Faith, located near Nelson Villa, where he played various musical instruments during services. Sandra, meanwhile, dedicated herself to the role of homemaker, providing a strong support system for her husband's spiritual aspirations. In 1984, the couple celebrated the birth of their first child, a son named William Jr. To differentiate father from son, the church community began referring to them as Bill and Will, respectively. As Will grew, he followed in his parents' footsteps, regularly attending church and participating in the community. Then, in 2001, history seemed to repeat itself. At 17, Will met 15-year-old Summer Cook during a church service. Their courtship, mirroring that of Bill and Sandra, quickly developed into a close bond, and by 2004, after 3 years of dating, the young couple wed. Will and Summer then moved in with his parents in their Logan home, a spacious residence that could accommodate the growing family. In that same year, Bill, who was 39 at the time, took a bold step in his spiritual journey by declaring himself a pastor. He transformed their garage into an improvised church, intending to lead his own congregation. While some local residents viewed Bill's self-proclaimed status with skepticism, others were drawn to the intimate and mysterious atmosphere of his home-based church. At first, only neighbors attended these services, but soon word spread, and people from all over the town came to listen, seek solace, and even leave donations. The following year, Will and Summer welcomed their first child, a son named Alex. The joys of new parenthood brought them closer, yet the financial strain became a pressing issue. Bill's church activities, though a passionate endeavor, did not generate substantial income, which left the family in a difficult situation. In 2006, in search of better economic prospects, the Inman family relocated to Florida. There, Bill and Will found steady work in construction, specializing in building hotels, while Sandra and Summer maintained the household and looked after young Alex. However, the Inmans' longing for Ohio remained strong, and after only 2 years in Florida, they made the decision to return home. Sadly, during their absence, they had lost the opportunity to reclaim their former home in Logan, forcing them to rent a property in the rural outskirts of Vinton. Shortly after their return, in 2008, Will and Summer's family expanded with the birth of their daughter, Kay. Then, in 2010, they welcomed a third child, a girl named Alana. Raising 3 young children posed challenges, yet Will and Summer made an effort to set aside time for each other. Almost every weekend, the children would stay with Bill and Sandra, who relished their roles as grandparents. In fact, the grandchildren brought a new sense of purpose to the elderly couple's lives, their household filled with the laughter and energy of youth. In the spring of 2010, Bill's aspirations took a significant turn when he was officially appointed as a pastor, now heading the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith. In collaboration with Sandra, he founded a charitable organization named the Ranch of Mercy. Their mission was clear: to extend aid to the underprivileged, including those who had lost their jobs, homes, or stability in life. Bill harbored a dream of constructing a substantial shelter for orphans and widows, an ambitious plan he hoped would become his legacy. However, turning this dream into reality required funding far beyond what the small church could muster. Bill's solution was to launch a fundraising lottery, selling tickets at $10 each, with the promise that one fortunate winner would walk away with a brand new house or a cash prize of $200,000. 99 additional prizes were promised to entice participation. With the support of local media and widespread advertisements, the lottery gained traction. Bill himself went door to door, fervently promoting the cause and appealing to people's sense of charity, assuring them that every dollar would go toward building the shelter for the disadvantaged. In total, Bill successfully sold 100,000 tickets, raising an impressive $1 million. The eagerly anticipated prize draw was scheduled for September 2010, marking what was supposed to be a significant milestone for the community. Yet even as Bill poured his energy into his ministry and charity work, underlying tensions began to take a toll on the family. The facade of unity that they had so carefully crafted began to show signs of strain. The responsibilities of parenthood weighed heavily on Will and Summer, who found themselves frequently at odds over the demands of raising 3 young children and the financial pressures that had plagued them for years. Though the couple leaned on Bill and Sandra for support, there was an undercurrent of resentment growing between the generations, fueled by financial dependency and differences in lifestyle and beliefs. For Bill and Sandra, the focus on charity and community outreach left them somewhat detached from the daily struggles within their own family. The ambitions Bill had for the Ranch of Mercy and the prize lottery seemed to overshadow the more personal aspects of his relationships. As he invested more of himself into the church and its mission, his role as a father and grandfather took a back seat. Sandra, though supportive, began to feel the weight of her husband's obsession with his pastoral work. Their life together, once so intimately aligned, was now marked by a subtle estrangement. In retrospect, what appeared as a family rooted in faith and bound by loyalty was also a family facing complex challenges, strained relationships, unfulfilled dreams, and the unforeseen burdens that accompany great aspirations. In June 2010, after 6 years of marriage, Summer Inman decided she couldn't continue living under the same roof as her husband. Despite her best efforts to maintain harmony, she felt suffocated and ready to break free from the expectations and restrictions that had dictated her life for so long. She opened her journal and recorded her frustrations and desires, her words carrying the weight of years spent in silence. "I'm so tired of pleasing everyone, so exhausted. Don't I deserve happiness? Don't I have the right to fall in love again and feel loved in return?" she wrote. It was a moment of clarity for Summer, a realization that the person she had become was a stranger to her. Her days were spent accommodating the wants and demands of those around her, and she wondered if she would ever have the courage to live for herself. Reflecting on her situation, she understood that her children, Alex, Kay, and Alana, were her greatest source of joy. The one reason she endured the pain of staying as long as she had. Still, she knew she couldn't continue modeling a life of quiet submission for them. "I don't want them to see their mother simply obeying someone else's will," she wrote. Will had already asked her what she wanted from life, a question she had struggled to answer. But she knew what she didn't want: to feel trapped, voiceless, and miserable. Her silence, her inability to act, was breaking her spirit. She confided in her journal, "Every day, all I can do is cry and sleep. Nothing more. I just don't know how to get out of this situation and make everything all right. I hope that the next time I write here, I'll have found the answer." Determined to make a change, Summer filed for divorce, packed a few essentials, and moved with her children to her parents' home. While she wanted to separate from Will, she didn't want to deprive the children of their relationship with their father. So she allowed regular visits between them and the Inman family. 2 months after her departure, Summer began dating Adam Peters, a man she found comfort in, and a new chapter opened for her as she took a job cleaning a bank in Logan. With no formal education, her employment options were limited, but the modest job symbolized her first step toward independence. Meanwhile, Bill's much-publicized lottery for Ranch of Mercy's house giveaway, scheduled for September, had yet to take place. Community members who had bought tickets for $10 each began to grow concerned as October passed without an update. Then it emerged that the construction of the prize house hadn't even started. Ticket holders became angry and confused, feeling that they'd been misled, while the Inmans, particularly Bill, gave little response to calls for refunds or clarification on the project's status. Then, in early December, as if life hadn't dealt them enough upheaval, the Inmans received notice that they needed to vacate their rented home due to unpaid rent. When Summer came by with Adam to collect her remaining belongings, tensions erupted. Will and his parents refused her entry, sparking a confrontation that escalated quickly. Frustrated and afraid, Summer called the police, explaining that Will had been threatening her and was refusing to return her personal items. When law enforcement arrived, Will's anger flared, and he not only threatened to harm Summer, but also lashed out at an officer. It was a breaking point, and Will's violent reaction only confirmed Summer's worst fears. In her official statement, Summer painted a picture of a marriage that had been far from the harmonious relationship others saw. She described a transformation in Will after their wedding. He became controlling, jealous, and increasingly demanding. He monitored her every move, dictated her actions down to the smallest details, and manipulated her through jealousy and intimidation. Even her personal routines weren't immune from his interference. He regulated her sleep, her eating habits, and her chores, wielding power over the most private aspects of her life. One particular incident left her feeling completely trapped. Will had taken her beloved cats without telling her, driving them away and later insisting that they had simply run away. She'd been devastated by the loss, and his laughter as he assured her she'd never see them again haunted her. The authorities stepped in, issuing a restraining order to prevent Will from approaching Summer. The charges led to a probationary sentence and a fine, while the custody battle intensified between the two families, each vying for the right to shape the children's future. Will, attempting to justify his behavior, argued that his strict control over Summer was motivated by suspicions of infidelity. He rationalized taking her phone and keys, claiming he feared she was hiding something. As for the cats, he insisted they had been a nuisance, scratching the furniture and even attacking family members, and so he had simply taken them to a shelter. His explanations, however, did little to win him sympathy. Instead, they further validated Summer's accounts of the psychological and emotional manipulation she had endured. The fallout of their separation affected not just Summer and Will, but rippled through the entire Inman family, who had been drawn into the tumult of Bill's lottery scheme and the marital discord. For Will's parents, particularly Bill, the loss of family unity was another blow amidst his faltering ambitions as a pastor and philanthropist. The supposed generosity of his Ranch of Mercy charity was now under scrutiny. Former supporters grew skeptical, viewing the lottery as an empty promise, while Bill's explanations remained vague and insufficient. Some even speculated that the charity's donations had been diverted to maintain the family's lifestyle or address personal debts rather than build the promised shelter. As the community's trust in the Inmans wavered, their once respected name became entangled in accusations, lawsuits, and whispers of fraud. This further strained the fractured family, who now not only had to contend with the divorce but also public scrutiny and financial instability. Will, feeling increasingly isolated, clung to his role as a father and fought bitterly in court to retain joint custody, insisting that he could provide the children with the stable upbringing they deserved. Meanwhile, Summer, who had long suppressed her own needs and desires, found herself fighting to reclaim her identity and secure a future for her children that was free from the patterns of control and coercion she had endured. In the months that followed, Summer's confidence grew as she rebuilt her life, gaining the strength to advocate for herself and her children. Although her journey was fraught with challenges, the move away from Will allowed her to rediscover parts of herself she'd long forgotten. Her budding relationship with Adam provided her with companionship and support, something she hadn't felt in years. Yet, as she continued down this path, the echoes of her past lingered, a reminder of the years she had spent silencing her own voice for the sake of others. The Inman's frustration with Adam Peters had only intensified in the months following Summer's decision to leave Will, and they quickly filed a police report alleging that Adam posed a serious threat to their grandchildren, Alex, Kay, and Alana. Concerned and increasingly bitter, Will and his parents saw Adam as a disruptive force, especially after the closeness he developed with Summer and the children. While some saw this as a desperate attempt to undermine Adam, for Will, it was a matter of both pride and resentment, which had reached a boiling point. On the night of March 22, 2011, Summer's life took a dark and chilling turn. The 25-year-old had just finished her shift at the bank and was going through her usual closing routine, cleaning the offices and preparing to lock up for the night. It was around 11:15 p.m. when she stepped outside to empty the trash. Before leaving the building, she sent Adam a quick message, expecting to meet him shortly after. But Adam, who waited anxiously to see her, would soon be gripped by a sense of dread. Summer never showed up. Concerned, he drove to the bank and, upon arrival, was met with a disturbing scene near the dumpster. Summer's belongings, her phone, keys, and an MP3 player with tangled headphones, lay scattered on the ground. Her jacket was tossed nearby, almost hidden in the bushes, as though left in a hurry. Fearful for her safety, Adam immediately contacted the police and called Summer's parents to alert them of her sudden disappearance. Initially, Summer's family clung to the hope that she had perhaps been delayed or misplaced her things in a hurry. However, after the bank's security team confirmed that no one had seen her since she clocked out, the gravity of the situation sank in. By the time law enforcement arrived, more than an hour had passed. Several bystanders had already gathered at the scene, including 2 women who had gone for an evening jog near the bank. They claimed to have witnessed Summer's abduction just an hour earlier. According to their account, a white Ford Crown Victoria had pulled up beside the dumpster with a blonde woman behind the wheel. 2 masked men wearing black balaclavas jumped from the car, forcefully grabbed Summer, and struggled to shove her into the back seat as she fought back, screaming and pleading for help. One of the joggers attempted to intervene, only to be sprayed in the face with pepper spray by the female driver. The kidnappers then sped off into the night, with Summer helplessly trapped in the vehicle. The joggers, shaken but determined, rushed to the nearest police station to report what they had seen. Despite their vivid description, the authorities seemed skeptical, initially brushing off their story as a possible prank or exaggeration. It wasn't until Summer's parents contacted them and expressed their deep concern that the police began to take the report seriously. Yet, precious time had already been lost. By the time officers arrived at the scene, any trace of the abductors had faded, and the possibility of tracking them while the trail was fresh had slipped away. News of Summer's disappearance spread rapidly throughout Logan, igniting a wave of concern and mobilizing the local community. Hundreds of residents volunteered in the search, but as days turned into weeks, hope began to wane, and the reality of the situation grew increasingly grim. Summer's parents fought hard to stay positive, avoiding thoughts of the worst-case scenario. A few weeks before her abduction, Summer had posted a family photo on Facebook, showing her, Adam, and the children smiling together. They looked content, like a family finding peace after years of turbulence. But seeing this picture on Adam's page stirred something fierce within Will. The rivalry between him and Adam had simmered quietly but deeply since Adam had entered their lives, and it became clear that Summer's connection with Adam had started well before her decision to end her marriage. In fact, the roots of their relationship went back to early 2010, when Adam began working for the Inmans, handling tasks around their home and yard. Initially, Summer kept her distance, refusing Adam's flirtatious advances. But over time, her resolve weakened. In one of her journal entries, she described her emotional turmoil, revealing how torn she felt between her faith and the powerful emotions she felt for Adam. "When our eyes met, I realized that the devil had taken hold of me," she confessed. "I didn't listen to the voice of God. I tried to stop myself. My mind screamed, 'Run, get out of here now.' But I stayed and allowed Adam to embrace me and then delve deeper. I regret it. I am guilty." In the end, Summer's relationship with Adam led her to confront her unhappiness in her marriage, and she soon realized she could no longer ignore her desire for love, fulfillment, and freedom. Just days before Summer's abduction, Will escalated his efforts to exert control over her life, petitioning the court to reduce his alimony payments. Will argued that his income was limited, and he resisted paying the original sum of $150 per child each month, instead requesting it be reduced to a mere $50. At that time, his annual income was only around $6,500, making his financial struggles apparent. However, it was also clear that the court proceedings symbolized something more, a way for Will to retain some control over his former wife and remind her of his presence and influence in her life. Yet, Will's financial hardships and attempts to regain control were overshadowed by the trauma of Summer's disappearance. The local media picked up on the abduction case quickly, with news outlets broadcasting the grim details of her last moments at the bank. People speculated about her whereabouts and who could have orchestrated such a bold act. As rumors spread, so did suspicion, with many looking to the Inmans for answers. Was this an act of revenge? An attempt to reclaim family stability by any means necessary? Or was it simply an unfortunate tragedy in a town unprepared for such violence? For Will's parents, the strain was palpable. They, too, were pulled into the whirlwind of accusations, gossip, and ongoing investigations. Ranch of Mercy, Bill's charitable organization, already in disarray after the failed lottery scheme, fell under further scrutiny as people questioned the family's integrity. Bill's supposed plans to aid the community and build a shelter for the needy had now been marred by the shadow of his son's legal battles, financial struggles, and the glaring spotlight of public suspicion. Adam, though devastated by Summer's disappearance, stood resilient in his support for her family, attending prayer vigils and remaining visible in the search efforts. For him, Summer had represented hope, love, and a fresh start. Her absence left him grappling with guilt and sadness, plagued by memories of the happiness they'd shared and the dreams they had started to build together. He questioned whether his presence in her life had made her a target, whether his closeness to her had fueled the animosity from her former husband's family. As the days continued to stretch on with no word of Summer, the community's prayers grew more fervent, and the mystery surrounding her abduction became one of Logan's most talked-about stories. Will and his parents, Bill and Sandra Inman, fiercely pursued sole custody of Will's children, desperate to keep them within the family. The judge, however, dismissed their request. Heartbroken by the decision, the Inmans were devastated, especially Bill and Sandra, for whom the children were the very purpose of life. The elderly couple's health visibly declined after losing contact with their grandchildren. As they waited for a resolution, they watched helplessly as their family continued to unravel. In March 2011, an investigation led to the Inman family. The trail led to the home of Bill's mother, a 70-year-old woman in Jackson County, Ohio. During the interrogation, Bill, Sandra, and Will firmly denied any involvement in Summer's abduction. They insisted that on the night of her disappearance, they had driven to Cleveland to inspect a house they were considering purchasing. They said their car broke down on the way and they had to spend the whole night on the side of the road, and they returned to Logan only the next morning. They reiterated that they'd always treated Summer well, only occasionally arguing with her. However, they did admit that since Adam Peters, Summer's new boyfriend, had entered her life, there had been growing tension. They described Adam as a disruptive influence, blaming him for tearing apart what they portrayed as a once happy family. The investigation took a decisive turn when the police became interested in a white Ford Crown Victoria parked outside the Inman family home. They confiscated the car's GPS device, which provided a crucial timeline. On the day of Summer's kidnapping, the car had been in Logan, not Cleveland. The GPS had been disabled around 5:30 p.m. on March 22nd, only to be reactivated the following morning, also in Logan. Additionally, phone records indicated that all three Inmans were in Logan throughout the night, contradicting their alibi of a road trip to Cleveland. Witnesses later reported seeing Bill, Sandra, and Will at a car wash around 7:30 a.m. on March 23rd, cleaning the car's interior thoroughly, yet Summer was nowhere in sight. The events following the car wash only deepened suspicions. From Logan, the Inmans drove to Cleveland, where they visited an auto repair shop to replace the nearly new tires on the car with older, worn ones. When asked, Bill dismissed the act as a personal preference, claiming he simply disliked the original tires. Yet he took additional measures to alter the vehicle's appearance, even removing a police-style spotlight he had installed near the side mirror. These actions painted a picture of a family intent on concealing something significant, and they didn't go unnoticed by the police. After several hours of intense questioning, Sandra, growing visibly distressed, began to crack. When faced with the grim reality that all three Inmans might face the death penalty, she admitted to their involvement in Summer's abduction. According to Sandra, the plan had been hers. She had wanted to intimidate Summer into allowing Will more access to the children. She explained that she only intended to scare her daughter-in-law, hoping to reason with her, but that things spiraled out of control. During Sandra's confession, she detailed the tragic sequence of events that had led to Summer's death. On that night, Will and Bill wore black balaclavas, waiting for Summer to finish her late shift. Sandra confessed that she was initially motivated by frustration over the custody arrangements and that she wanted to talk some sense into Summer. She explained, "The plan was to drive her out somewhere private and have a conversation. But when we got there, things escalated. I only wanted her to feel scared, to listen to us. I never wanted her dead." Sandra admitted that her husband and son restrained Summer as they forced her into the back of the car. Witnesses had seen her struggling, heard her shouting for help, but were frightened off when Sandra, who sat in the driver's seat, reportedly sprayed pepper spray at one of them. While Sandra drove, Summer continued to fight against Bill and Will, who held her down in the back seat. Sandra's recollection grew shaky, haunted by what happened next. She was scared, screaming. I don't know. She kept struggling, and then something happened. I could hear them trying to hold her, to get her to be quiet, but they were too rough. They didn't mean to hurt her like that. It wasn't supposed to end this way. Pressed by investigators, Sandra recounted the final moments as best as she could, revealing that the family had restrained Summer tightly, trying to silence her pleas for help. She admitted that while she'd convinced herself the plan would be harmless, it had taken a dark turn once Will and Bill restrained Summer in the back seat. Sandra added that Summer's injuries during the struggle, along with the emotional strain on her, had resulted in her tragic death. Shocked at what had happened, the family had scrambled to cover their tracks. After her confession, Sandra was overcome with guilt, admitting that her attempts to fix the family had instead brought about irreversible tragedy. Her regret was palpable as she told the interrogators. "I thought if we could just scare her, make her realize how much the children needed us, then maybe she'd listen. I never imagined it would end like this, but I kept pushing. I thought I knew what was best." Sandra's statement underscored how her desperation and disillusionment had driven her to conceive a plan that would irrevocably devastate her family. In her mind, it was the only way to reestablish the family's unity, a last-ditch effort to resolve the bitterness and loss that had engulfed them since Summer left Will. The revelation of this tragic motive stunned investigators, who had initially believed the abduction was an act of pure retaliation or anger. Instead, they uncovered a story of misguided loyalty, desperation, and Sandra's conviction that the children would suffer without their father's presence. She lamented, "I thought I was doing the right thing for my grandchildren, but instead, I tore everything apart." When Summer was forced into the car that night, Will immediately bound her hands, feet, and neck with plastic zip ties, hoping to subdue her as she fought, screamed, and desperately resisted. But Summer's strength and resolve were no match for the confinement, and eventually, her body went limp. Will quickly noticed her unresponsiveness, panic flooding through him as he yelled out, "Mom, where's the knife? I can't find it." The family frantically searched the car for anything sharp to cut the bindings. They had intended only to scare her, to intimidate her into agreeing to a visitation arrangement for the children. But by the time they found a tool, precious minutes had passed, and it was tragically too late. Summer had suffocated. Sandra swore that they never intended to kill Summer, only to frighten her enough to concede to a custody agreement that would allow the Inmans to see their grandchildren regularly. Yet the plan, flawed and cruel from the outset, had spiraled into irreversible tragedy. On March 29, a week after Summer's disappearance, Sandra led the police to where they had hidden her body. In a horrific and heart-wrenching reveal, Summer had been thrown into an abandoned well on the grounds of the very church the Inmans had attended for decades, the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith near Nelsonville, a site Bill had once helped build. Bill and Sandra had even married in that church nearly 3 decades prior, under the very arches that now held their darkest secret. The police pried open the concrete lid that covered the well, and a terrible sight awaited them. Summer lay at the bottom, head first, still in the clothes she had been wearing the night she was abducted. A black t-shirt ironically emblazoned with the words, "I don't have an anger problem. I have an idiot problem." The autopsy would reveal that she died of strangulation, with the plastic ties marking her neck, wrists, and ankles, her final silent witnesses to the torment she endured. Sandra later admitted that her initial plan had been to dispose of Summer's body in a nearby river. However, fearing discovery, she decided instead on the well, reasoning that it was secluded, unused, and sacred ground, a place where no one would think to search. As she confessed to her role in the crime, Sandra expressed sincere remorse, haunted by her own miscalculation and the irreversible consequence of her actions. She tearfully claimed responsibility for the plan, insisting that her sole intention was to scare Summer, to restore family harmony by forcing her daughter-in-law to permit access to her grandchildren. But when the trial finally took place, only Sandra showed genuine regret for her actions. She was the only one who wept openly in court, her hands trembling as she begged Summer's parents for forgiveness. "Summer was like a daughter to me," she cried, her voice choked with emotion. "If I could turn back time, I would never have taken this horrible step." Despite her pleas, the outcome was grim. The court sentenced Bill and Will Inman to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sandra received a life sentence as well, but with a possibility of parole after 15 years. However, even as the sentences were handed down, those who knew the Inmans doubted Sandra's account. Church friends and fellow parishioners voiced disbelief that Sandra could have been the mastermind behind the plot. Bill, known as a domineering presence within the family, was widely regarded as the true orchestrator of the Inmans' actions. Parishioners noted his long-held grip over Sandra and Will, who had been raised in a household of rigid control and unquestioning obedience. 12-year-old Tia Lee Palmer was a bright young girl with her whole life ahead of her. But her story is one marked by heartbreak and tragedy. Tia fell victim to a series of events that revealed both the vulnerability of children in the care system and the darker undercurrents of human behavior. Her biological mother, Cindy Palmer, sensing a genuine and immediate danger to her daughter's life due to the abusive behavior of her husband, made the gut-wrenching decision to place Tia in the custody of Child Protective Services. Cindy, herself a victim of domestic violence, hoped this decision would protect her daughter and give her a chance at a safer, brighter future. However, as events unfolded, it became painfully clear that this well-intentioned act would ultimately lead Tia into an even more perilous situation. The challenges for Tia, known affectionately as T by her loved ones, began long before she entered the child protection system. The toxic environment at home had already begun to shape her life, leading to behavioral issues and frequent attempts to escape the chaos. She became known as a troubled child who often ran away from home, seeking refuge from the turmoil of her parents' relationship. Her mother, though well-meaning, struggled with her own circumstances and found herself unable to provide the stability Tia desperately needed. By January 2015, after bouncing between foster families due to her perceived confrontational nature, Tia was placed with the Thorburn family. The Thorburns, living in Chambers Flat, a quaint and seemingly peaceful town about 40 minutes from Brisbane, were considered a model family. Rick Thorburn, the patriarch, ran a food truck business and managed a horse farm, while his wife Julene operated a daycare center from their home. Their two teenage sons, John, 19, and Trent, 18, completed the family. To Child Protective Services, this household seemed like the perfect place for Tia, who by this time had already faced significant upheaval in her life. Initially, the arrangement seemed promising. Tia attended Morrison State High School, just a short drive from her new home. The Thorburns appeared to be adjusting to their new role as foster parents, and outwardly, life seemed to settle into a routine. However, beneath the surface, tensions brewed. Tia, uncomfortable living with two older boys in a new and unfamiliar environment, found it hard to adapt. Though she remained with the Thorburns for 4 months, her struggles never truly abated. On October 30, 2015, what started as an ordinary day turned into the beginning of a nightmare. Rick Thorburn drove Tia to school as usual, then returned home to work on his car. A few hours later, a call from the school shattered the veneer of normalcy. The school informed the Thorburns that Tia had not shown up for her classes. While it was not the first time she had run away, This time felt different. In the past, Tia had been quickly found or returned home on her own. This time, despite Rick's social media post pleading for information about her whereabouts, no one came forward. The Thorburn family knew Tia was eagerly looking forward to Halloween, just days away. She had carefully prepared her costume and was filled with excitement for the holiday. Her disappearance right before Halloween cast a shadow over their household, prompting them to contact the police. Tia was officially declared missing. However, given her history of running away, authorities and even those close to her assumed she would return on her own. The urgency of the situation seemed lost in the belief that this was yet another fleeting episode in a troubled girl's life. Less than a week after her disappearance, on the early morning of November 5, 2015, a grim discovery changed everything. A fisherman called emergency services after finding a body in the reeds along the shallows of the Pimpama River, about 30 miles south of Tia's last known location. The condition of the body was horrifying. Extensively decomposed, likely worsened by the humid climate and local wildlife. Upon arriving, police could not immediately determine the deceased's gender or identity, but speculated it was a teenager. The body was clad only in underwear, further intensifying the mystery and horror surrounding the discovery. The remains were transported for forensic analysis and an autopsy. By comparing the body with reports of missing persons in the area, investigators strongly suspected the deceased was Tia. This grim suspicion was confirmed by DNA analysis, crushing any lingering hope of her safe return. The autopsy revealed devastating details. Injuries initially assumed to be animal bites were determined to be inflicted by a human, likely in an act of unspeakable violence. Tia had been murdered. The case, now reclassified as a homicide, launched a full-scale investigation. Rick Thorburn, as the last known person to see Tia alive, became the first subject of police scrutiny. Detectives questioned him extensively. His responses, marked by hesitation and inconsistency, raised immediate suspicions. "You have anything to do with the death of Tia?" "Absolutely not," he replied. "Is there anything you can tell me about this man?" "Nothing at all. I dropped her off." While his vague and contradictory statements hinted at deception, the investigators needed concrete evidence. Hoping to gather additional insights, they questioned other members of the Thorburn family. Rick's wife, Julene, and their 2 sons corroborated his story. Tia was dropped off at school at 7:30 a.m., and no one had seen her since. Their accounts, however, did little to resolve the growing doubts. Detectives turned their focus to Morrison State High School, where Tia was supposed to have been dropped off. After interviewing over 100 individuals, including students, teachers, and staff, it became clear that no one had seen Tia that day. Surveillance footage from cameras outside and inside the school provided conclusive proof. Tia had never arrived. The question loomed large. Where had she gone after leaving the Thorburn home? As detectives pieced together the timeline, they uncovered crucial information from Tia's classmates. 2 female students, close friends of Tia, revealed she had been struggling with severe issues in her foster home. According to them, Tia confided about conflicts with her foster family, including troubling interactions with Rick Thorburn and his 2 sons. These revelations cast the Thorburn household in a new light, suggesting that the seemingly idyllic family might harbor dark secrets. Further investigation into the Thorburn family's dynamics painted a grim picture. Tia reportedly felt uncomfortable and even fearful around her foster brothers, who were significantly older than her. This discomfort had only grown during her stay. Coupled with her previous struggles, it became clear that Tia's life in the Thorburn household was far from the safe and supportive environment she was promised. As detectives dug deeper, Rick Thorburn's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. His demeanor during questioning oscillated between nervousness and defiance, suggesting he was hiding something. Investigators now faced the daunting task of unraveling a web of deceit to uncover the truth about Tia's final moments. One of Tia's friends confided to the police that shortly before her disappearance, Tia had begged to be taken away from the Thorburns' home, She claimed she was being mistreated and feared trouble was coming her way. However, the friend, being young herself, could not make such a decision for her family to bring Tia home. She also didn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation, believing it was just another episode of Tia's dramatic outbursts. Tragically, it became clear too late that Tia's fears were justified. Within days of these pleas, Tia was found dead under horrific circumstances. This revelation added a troubling dimension to the case. Despite Tia's apparent cries for help, the police faced conflicting narratives. Investigators, realizing the lack of any other obvious suspect, began to focus more closely on the Thorburns. Yet, the family denied all accusations. They claimed Tia's accounts of mistreatment were fabrications, much like the complaints she had reportedly made while with previous foster families. The police confirmed that Tia had a history of running away and was often described as a troubled teenager. This history complicated the investigation, as it made her allegations appear less credible to some. The Thorburns' neighbors and acquaintances unanimously vouched for the family, describing them as kind, responsible, and beyond reproach. Their daycare business had been trusted by many parents in the community, who could not believe such an upstanding family was capable of harming Tia. With no solid evidence to directly implicate the Thorburns, the police turned their attention elsewhere. They examined other possibilities, including the potential involvement of registered sex offenders in the area. Over 300 individuals were interviewed, but none emerged as viable suspects. Many had alibis, while others no longer lived in the region. The investigation seemed to hit a wall. On December 4, 2015, investigators made a discovery that reignited public interest in the case. About 100 meters from where Tia's body had been found, search teams located a shoe and her school backpack. These items were confirmed to belong to her, but they offered no new insights into the circumstances of her death. By now, the case had attracted national attention. Media coverage turned Tia's murder into a cause célèbre, with outraged citizens demanding answers and justice. Vigils and protests were organized, with participants carrying signs and chanting for accountability from the authorities and child protection agencies. Tia's biological mother became a vocal figure in the campaign for justice. She publicly criticized Child Protective Services, accusing them of failing her daughter. Her interviews on television resonated with many who shared her anger and grief, further fueling public outcry. Protests were held in Tia's name, with her mother spearheading efforts to keep the case in the spotlight. On the day of Tia's funeral, over 600 mourners gathered to pay their respects. The majority had never met her in life but were moved by her tragic story. Many wore white and purple t-shirts adorned with her name and hearts, as purple was her favorite color. The ceremony was somber yet poignant, with approximately 400 white roses placed on her coffin. As her hearse departed for a private cremation, purple balloons were released into the sky, symbolizing the innocence and vibrancy of a life taken too soon. Yet, despite the extensive publicity and public engagement, substantial leads continued to elude investigators. The investigation into Tia Palmer's tragic death had reached a standstill, despite the intense efforts of law enforcement and public calls for justice. Tia's mother made an emotional plea on television, urging witnesses to come forward and the guilty parties to confess to their crime. The police, in addition to offering a monetary reward of 250,000 Australian dollars, promised immunity from prosecution to any accomplice who came forward with crucial information, provided they hadn't been directly involved in committing the crime. Still, these desperate measures yielded no new leads. Concerned citizens made several calls to report tips, but they all led to dead ends. By the summer of 2016, the police found themselves no closer to identifying the perpetrator, much less apprehending them. Detectives meticulously interrogated individuals with a history of sexual violence, hoping to uncover a lead. However, their efforts were hampered by the advanced decomposition of Tia's body when it was discovered. This made it impossible for forensic experts to determine the exact cause of her death. The only clue they had was a broken hyoid bone, suggesting that she may have been strangled. With no other leads, investigators theorized that Tia could have been abducted by a random motorist near the school, The fact that the drop-off area wasn't covered by surveillance cameras only added credibility to this hypothesis. Yet, this was merely a theory, and it didn't bring them closer to solving the mystery. The reward for information remained unclaimed, and the case seemed to grow colder with each passing week. Then, in May 2016, a significant breakthrough arrived. After more than 6 months of fruitless investigation, the state police department received an anonymous call. The unknown informant claimed to have crucial information regarding Tia Palmer and the Thorburn Foster family. According to the caller, the Thorburns had sought out a troubled child specifically to gain increased government benefits. They had no genuine concern for Tia's well-being, driven instead by purely financial motives. Moreover, the informant confidently asserted that every member of the family could have been involved in what had happened to the young girl. Before police could ask for further details, the informant hung up. Efforts to trace the call were unsuccessful, but the information prompted investigators to revisit the possibility that the Thorburns were involved in Tia's murder. At the beginning of the investigation, allegations of domestic violence within the Thorburn household had been brought forward by students at Tia's school. However, those claims were initially dismissed due to a lack of evidence. Now, with renewed determination, detectives returned to this line of inquiry. They began by interviewing Tia's classmates again, hoping to uncover new details about her life with the Thorburns. During these interviews, one of Tia's friends made a shocking revelation. Tia had confided in her about an intimate relationship with Trent Thorburn, Rick and Julene's 19-year-old son. Trent was known as a local heartthrob, charming and seemingly confident. According to Tia's friend, Tia had believed that what she had with Trent was a genuine relationship. She was young and naive, and Trent had manipulated her emotions, convincing her that their interactions were based on love. Tia, for her part, had fallen for his charms, admiring both him and the horses on the family farm. Yet, at the same time, she was deeply afraid of Trent and the rest of the Thorburn family. The friend's account suggested that Tia was subjected to more than just emotional manipulation. There were strong indications that she had been a victim of sexual abuse at the hands of Trent, and that this abuse was compounded by instances of brutal physical violence. Tia had wanted to run away from the Thorburns, but her fear kept her trapped. It was a heartbreaking realization that Tia had been experiencing this turmoil without anyone intervening to help her escape. With these new statements, police recognized the urgent need for a deeper investigation. They questioned the Thorburns yet again, trying to uncover cracks in their seemingly unified story. However, every member of the family denied any wrongdoing. They insisted that Trent had no inappropriate interactions with Tia and that the allegations were baseless. The Thorburns were well practiced in maintaining their facade, showing no signs of guilt or remorse. Despite the Thorburn family's unwavering denials, the police were determined not to let the investigation fall into complacency. They began placing the family under more intense surveillance, scrutinizing every aspect of their lives, hoping that the truth would eventually slip through the cracks. They worked to obtain warrants for wiretaps and began monitoring communications in and out of the Thorburn household. It was during this surveillance period that the family's sinister facade began to unravel. The police uncovered a series of incriminating conversations between Rick, Julene, and their sons. These conversations revealed the extent of their involvement in Tia's tragic death and their desperate attempts to cover their tracks. It became evident that the entire family had played a role in the crime, whether in the act itself or in the subsequent cover-up. The most chilling part of these wiretaps was Trent's casual discussion with his parents, indicating that they were all aware of Tia's abuse and were actively involved in silencing her to protect themselves. Trent's motivation appeared to be rooted in the twisted belief that he deserved Tia's affection without consequence. He manipulated the young girl, taking advantage of her vulnerability, and when things spiraled out of control, the entire family became complicit in the crime to protect their own interests. On the surface, Rick and Julene Thorburn had presented themselves as caring foster parents, but the wiretaps painted a very different picture, one of manipulation, greed, and cruelty. It was confirmed that the family had indeed sought out a troubled child purely for financial gain. Tia was nothing more than a means to an end, And when she became inconvenient, when she posed a threat to their reputation and freedom, they decided she had to be silenced. The arrest of the Thorburn family shocked the community. The seemingly perfect foster family, who had taken care of other children and had run a respected daycare, was now exposed for their heinous crimes. The public outcry grew even louder, with many questionings how the foster care system had failed to identify such blatant red flags. Due to the mounting suspicions around the Thorburn family, the authorities decided to take decisive action. Their license to operate a home daycare was revoked, and their authorization to foster children was immediately suspended. Behind the scenes, law enforcement officials installed listening devices throughout the Thorburn residence. What they uncovered day after day shattered the previously maintained image of a respectable family. Each overheard conversation painted a chilling picture, gradually revealing the toxic dynamics within the Thorburn household. An image completely at odds with what Rick, Julene, and their sons had tried so hard to project. One conversation that stood out was a family meeting held on October 29, 2015, the night before Tia vanished. During the meeting, Trent informed his parents that Tia had been experiencing significant stomach pain, and they feared the possibility that she might be pregnant. This suspicion was particularly alarming to Rick and Julene, who had recently become aware of Trent's relationship with Tia. What they learned from Trent was even more shocking. Under the watchful ear of the wiretap, Trent admitted that he had repeatedly engaged in sexual intercourse with Tia, his foster sister, over a period of 10 months, the entirety of her stay with them. 19-year-old Trent, aware of the 7-year age gap, feared that any discovery of their relationship would make him a criminal in the eyes of the law. Seeking guidance from his father, he revealed his concerns. Rick, seemingly unfazed, assured Trent that he would handle it, which later transpired to be a dark euphemism for something much worse. Tia had always been visibly terrified of her foster father, Rick. She had an instinctual fear of being alone with him, something her friends had noticed but could not interpret. Other members of the family also held Rick in fearful regard. Behind his outward image as a dedicated father figure lurked a cruel, manipulative, and abusive man. He ruled the household with an iron fist, instilling fear in everyone who lived under his roof. After that family meeting on October 29th, Rick ordered everyone to leave the house, insisting that he be left alone with Tia. They complied without question. Hours later, when they returned, Tia was nowhere to be found. When they inquired about her, Rick simply stated that she had run away and reassured them that the problem was solved, that she wouldn't be speaking to anyone ever again. It became obvious to the rest of the family that Tia was dead and that Rick had something to do with it. But none dared challenge him. When one of the brothers attempted to go to Tia's room, Rick blocked the door and threatened him. After that, everyone fell in line, and the entire incident was hushed up. The story that Rick had driven Tia to school and that she had subsequently disappeared was a complete fabrication. The truth was far more horrifying. In reality, Tia never left the Thorburn household that day. Instead, it became increasingly evident to investigators that she had met her tragic end at the hands of Rick Thorburn while still inside the home. Yet what exactly happened that night remained shrouded in mystery. Rick was careful never to divulge details, even in his private moments when the surveillance devices would have recorded them. The wiretaps, however, did reveal Rick's consistent efforts to coach his family on what to say and how to behave when questioned by police. His control over his family was absolute, and their fear of him ensured that they complied without hesitation. Law enforcement officials made the tactical decision to bring in Julene and the Thorburn brothers for questioning first, believing that they would be easier to crack under pressure. Slowly but surely, as investigators laid out the evidence they had collected, cracks in their stories began to appear. Under pressure, they each started to reveal more about what had transpired inside that house. The detectives could sense the guilt and fear in their voices as they spoke about the events of that fateful night. One of the most chilling moments during questioning came when Julene spoke about the last time she saw Tia alive.
We were concerned she could be pregnant or something.
And did you have that conversation with Rick at that time?
I think it did I think it did.
Okay.
It was mentioned,
Yeah.
but no, pains in the stomach, no.
The last time I saw her, she was in her bedroom, sitting on her bed. Julene said, her voice trembling. I wished her a good night. I told her she should stay there until she was ready to sleep. When asked where Rick was, she hesitated before answering, I believe he was outside the kitchen door waiting for me to return. There was no one else in the house at that time. From this, it became clear to detectives that Rick had orchestrated the circumstances that led to Tia being alone with him that night. In the following hours, Julene and Trent described the palpable fear they had felt. Fear of what Rick might do if anyone defied him. I just wanted to go to the police, Trent admitted during questioning, visibly shaken. But I knew if I did, I wouldn't even make it 10 steps out the door before he retaliated. I was terrified. It was a shocking admission, one that highlighted not only Rick's monstrous nature, but also the deep fear he instilled in his entire family. For months, they had lived with the knowledge of what happened to Tia, too terrified to speak out, fearing Rick's violent retribution. Their confession painted a grim picture of a household under siege, a home in which Rick Thorburn's rule was absolute and dissent was not tolerated. Rick Thorburn meticulously arranged everything to appear as if he was protecting his family. He fabricated an alibi and orchestrated a series of events to cover his tracks. However, after an exhaustive examination of surveillance footage near the school, law enforcement concluded that Rick had gone to great lengths to conceal his crime and reinforce the false story he concocted. Surveillance cameras did capture his car driving towards the school that morning, but at no point was Tia seen getting out of the vehicle. The lack of footage showing Tia arriving at the school only confirmed investigators' worst suspicions. Accusations and suspicions began to rain down on the Thorburn family. Julene and Joshua, the eldest son, were accused of providing false testimony and actively attempting to obstruct the investigation. Investigators suspected Trent of sexual assault against Tia, while Rick was believed to have committed premeditated murder. Moreover, the family was thought to have conspired to cover up the crime together. Detectives came to the chilling conclusion that Rick had not only murdered Tia, but had also intentionally disfigured her body to make identification difficult. A grisly detail confirmed by the fact that authorities initially couldn't even determine the victim's gender. However, modern DNA analysis revealed the girl's identity, despite Rick's apparent ignorance of the advancements in forensic science. Beyond the murder, law enforcement officials found themselves compelled to explore even darker suspicions. There were strong indications that Rick had abused not just Tia, but his own children as well. The allegations pointed towards both sexual and physical abuse, painting a horrifying picture of the man who had presented himself as a loving father and responsible caretaker. 9 charges were ultimately brought against Rick, with some unrelated to Tia's murder. Trent, on the other hand, faced charges of incest and perjury for his involvement and lies during the investigation. The investigation also led detectives to a troubling discovery involving Trent. Immediately after Tia's disappearance, a horse owned by Trent had been sold to a new owner. Upon inspection, bloodstains were found inside the horse's stable. This discovery raised serious questions about how far the family had gone to eliminate any trace of Tia and the brutal acts committed against her. The mounting pressure of the investigation and subsequent arrest took a serious toll on Rick's health. On the day of his detention, Rick lost consciousness. His condition was deemed so critical that doctors were forced to place him in an induced coma. After a few days in the hospital, Rick regained consciousness, and doctors suspected he had deliberately worsened his health by taking certain medications, hoping to evade justice. Fortunately, Rick's attempt to escape responsibility ultimately failed, and he had to face the consequences of his heinous actions. The shocking details of Tia Palmer's murder not only sparked widespread public outrage, but also captured intense media attention. The Australian legal and foster care systems came under heavy scrutiny, facing sharp criticism from all corners of society. How could someone like Rick Thorburn have been allowed to foster children? How could someone with such sinister intentions go unnoticed by the system designed to protect the vulnerable? Finally, all the members of the Thorburn family stood trial. The sheer cynicism, cruelty, and coordinated effort behind their actions stunned the public, who collectively demanded justice for Tia. The prosecution's aggressive approach left little room for the defense's arguments. The evidence against the Thorburns was overwhelming, and the family members started to crumble under its weight. The trial itself was filled with moments that shocked not only the jurors, but also those watching the proceedings. Rick Thorburn appeared in court with a stern face, his demeanor betraying little emotion. He was a man clearly trying to maintain his composure, yet those who knew the details of his crime saw his behavior as callous and unfeeling. Julene and Joshua Thorburn, in their confessions, painted a detailed picture of the events that had transpired within the home. The prosecutor, in his opening statements, outlined a case of systematic abuse, manipulation, and murder. Julene's testimony in particular was a pivotal moment in the trial. With a quivering voice, she detailed how Rick controlled the household, his iron fist dominance over the family, and the night when he decided that something had to be done about Tia. She admitted that she feared for her own safety and that of her children, and felt powerless to stop Rick. Her voice trembled as she described Rick's calm demeanor as he ordered her and the others to leave the house that fateful night, knowing full well what was about to happen. The most gut-wrenching testimony came from Trent Thorburn, who confessed to having a sexual relationship with Tia. He described how he was manipulated by his father into thinking this relationship was somehow acceptable, though he admitted under cross-examination that he knew what he was doing was wrong. The courtroom fell silent when Trent spoke of his suspicions that Tia might be pregnant, and how this had led him to confide in Rick. The prosecutor wasted no time highlighting Trent's selfish motivations, his fear of legal consequences rather than any concern for Tia's welfare. The forensic evidence presented in court further illustrated the horror Tia endured.
At that point, he just said that Trent had had sex with Tia, and Dad proceeded to say that we all had to protect Trent. We all had to keep a story amongst everyone.
Photographs of the crime scene, the bloodstains found in the horse stable, and the graphic details from the autopsy were displayed to the jurors. The autopsy confirmed that Tia's hyoid bone had been broken, a sign of strangulation, and the bruising on her body indicated that she had been beaten before her death. The prosecution made it clear that this was a calculated, premeditated act meant to silence Tia forever. The defense's attempts to portray Rick as a man under immense pressure, struggling to keep his family together, were met with derision by both the prosecution and the public. The prosecutor countered by showing Rick's repeated attempts to cover up the crime, the falsified alibis, and the sale of the horse. All actions that pointed to a man who knew exactly what he was doing. As the trial drew to a close, the jurors were visibly affected by what they had heard. The brutal details of the abuse and the family's efforts to cover up the crime left them with little doubt about the Thorburns' guilt. The prosecution's final statements were particularly powerful, emphasizing the betrayal of trust that had occurred. Tia Palmer was placed in the Thorburn household by the state under the belief that she would be cared for and protected. Instead, she was abused, exploited, and ultimately murdered by the very people who were supposed to provide her with safety. The jurors deliberated for only a few hours before returning with their verdicts. All members of the Thorburn family were found guilty of various crimes, including conspiracy, obstruction of justice, sexual abuse, and murder. The judge did not mince words during sentencing, stating that Rick Thorburn's actions were the epitome of evil. He emphasized that Rick had not only taken an innocent life, but had also corrupted his own family, manipulating them into becoming complicit in his crime. Joshua received a sentence of 3 months in prison, while his mother, Julene, was sentenced to 1.5 years for her false testimony. Their sentences reflected their lesser involvement compared to Rick and Trent, but to many, it seemed an insufficient consequence for their role in enabling Tia's tragic end. Trent, who had raped Tia and later lied to protect his father, received a 4-year prison sentence for incest, obstruction of justice, and perjury. Shockingly, Trent was released after only 16 months behind bars, in 2018, a fact that enraged the public, who believed justice had not been adequately served. Rick, the central figure behind Tia's murder, was sentenced to life imprisonment in May 2018, with the possibility of parole no earlier than 20 years. That day began like any other for the road workers assigned to their routine patrol along the bustling highway. Their job was an unglamorous yet essential one: clearing debris, checking for hazards, and ensuring the safety of countless drivers passing by. There was no reason to believe that this day would be any different. The men moved systematically along the roadside, their trained eyes scanning the withered grass and asphalt for anything out of place. It was during one of these methodical scans that they noticed something unusual: a bright red suitcase sitting conspicuously against the dull palette of roadside vegetation. Its vibrant hue was so out of sync with its surroundings that it immediately drew their attention. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than discarded luggage, perhaps carelessly left behind by a distracted traveler. Yet, as they approached, a sense of unease began to settle over them. There was something peculiar about the way the suitcase was positioned, something almost too deliberate. Despite the uneasiness gnawing at their instincts, curiosity won out. With hesitant hands, they unzipped the suitcase and instantly wished they hadn't. Inside lay a sight that no amount of training or experience could prepare them for: the lifeless body of a young woman, contorted into an unnatural position. The discovery was a jarring, horrific moment that left even the most stoic among them visibly shaken. What lay before them was not just the tragic evidence of a life ended prematurely, but a grim testament to a monstrous act. Later, the victim was identified as Valyria Reyes, a vivacious and talented 24-year-old woman whose potential had been cruelly stolen. Valyria's story was one of promise and passion, her life a testament to the beauty of human connection and creativity. Born and raised in a warm, nurturing suburb near New York, Valyria was the heartbeat of her close-knit family. Her parents, Maria and Carlos Reyes, had emigrated from Colombia, bringing with them rich cultural traditions and an unyielding work ethic that shaped Valyria's upbringing. Her father worked as a dedicated schoolteacher, instilling in her a love for learning and a sense of responsibility, while her mother was a compassionate nurse whose empathy and strength were pillars in Valyria's life. Valyria's relationship with her family was the cornerstone of her existence. She was the eldest of 4 siblings, with 3 younger brothers who adored her and looked up to her as both a sister and a role model. Her eldest brother, Diego, was particularly close to her, sharing a mutual passion for art that often led to long evenings spent sketching and brainstorming ideas for their dream of opening a tattoo studio together. Valyria's 2 middle brothers, Marco and Luis, were her confidants and partners in countless adventures, whether exploring local art galleries or supporting each other through the trials of adolescence. The Reyes household was filled with laughter and love, and Valyria's radiant personality was its cornerstone. Her vivacity was infectious, and she had an innate ability to uplift those around her. Friends often described her as the glue that held their social circles together, always organizing gatherings and ensuring that no one felt left out. Valyria's charisma extended beyond her personal relationships. She was a beloved figure in her community, volunteering at local shelters and participating in neighborhood events with unwavering enthusiasm. Her relationship with her mother was profoundly special. They weren't merely parent and child, but best friends who could confide in one another about everything: big dreams, hidden fears, and cherished secrets. This deep connection fueled Valyria's adventurous spirit and creative ambitions. She was an artist with many talents. Her drawings were a reflection of her vibrant soul. Her voice could mesmerize a room, and her dream of becoming a professional tattoo artist spoke to her desire to leave a permanent mark of beauty on the world. With her older brother Diego as her mentor, she diligently practiced her craft, envisioning a future where they could open a tattoo studio together. It was a dream fueled by hope and boundless creativity, one that symbolized their shared aspirations and the legacy they wished to build. When Valyria wasn't immersed in her artistic pursuits, she worked at a small, independent bookstore called Pages and Palettes. The quiet hum of that shop, the smell of books, and the thoughtful conversations with customers brought her a unique kind of joy. It was a sanctuary where her love for stories and people could intertwine seamlessly. She organized book clubs, hosted poetry readings, and curated art exhibitions, making the bookstore a vibrant hub for the creative community. Her ability to connect with people through literature and art made her a beloved figure among regular patrons, who often praised her for creating an inviting and inspiring atmosphere. Valyria's academic journey was equally impressive. She attended a local community college where she majored in fine arts with a focus on illustration. Her professors often lauded her for her technical skills and her ability to infuse emotion and narrative into her work. Scholarships and accolades dotted her educational path, but Valyria remained humble, always eager to learn and grow. Her commitment to her studies was matched by her dedication to her extracurricular activities, where she held leadership roles in various art clubs and student organizations. These experiences not only honed her artistic talents, but also developed her leadership and organizational skills, further preparing her for the ambitious plans she held for her future. Yet, as with many bright stars, Valyria's life was not without its shadows. In January 2018, she met Javier Dilva on a popular dating app. Javier, a 26-year-old Venezuelan immigrant, had a story that resonated with her empathetic nature. He had fled the turmoil of his homeland, seeking a fresh start in New York. His resilience and determination struck a chord with Valyria, and their initial connection was magnetic. They shared stories of their pasts, their dreams, and their mutual love for art and literature, which quickly deepened their bond. In the span of just a few months, their relationship went from promising to precarious. Javier's initially charming demeanor began to reveal a darker side. At first, it was subtle. Occasional jealousy over her time spent with friends, minor disagreements over plans and priorities. However, as time went on, his behavior became increasingly controlling. Javier's once endearing attentiveness turned suffocating as he began to monitor Valyria's every move, questioning her interactions with others and demanding constant reassurance of her feelings for him. Valyria, who had always valued her independence and close-knit relationships with family and friends, found herself growing uneasy under the weight of Javier's demands. His demands for commitment, particularly his fixation on marriage, felt premature and overwhelming. Javier would often bring up the topic of marriage in casual conversations, pressuring Valyria to consider a future that she wasn't ready for. His insistence created a rift between them, as Valyria struggled to balance her love for Javier with her own aspirations and need for personal space. Recognizing the toxicity creeping into their interactions, Valyria decided to end things. What should have been a step toward freedom became a harrowing ordeal. Javier's reaction to the breakup was nothing short of obsessive. He refused to accept her decision, inundating her with messages, texts, emails, phone calls, each one more desperate than the last. He began orchestrating accidental run-ins, showing up uninvited at places Valyria frequented, including her workplace at Pages and Palettes. His presence became a constant source of anxiety, making it difficult for Valyria to feel safe or at ease in her own life. Javier's behavior escalated from persistent pleading to aggressive confrontations, threatening to expose personal details of Valyria's life to mutual acquaintances and even her family if she didn't reconsider. Valyria sought support from her family and friends, who rallied around her, providing the emotional strength she needed to distance herself from Javier. Despite their efforts, Javier's fixation only intensified. He started stalking her online, creating fake social media profiles to monitor her activities and manipulate her perception of reality. The constant fear and stress took a toll on Valyria's mental and emotional well-being, overshadowing her once bright outlook on life. Her dreams of opening a tattoo studio with Diego began to feel distant as the shadow of Javier's obsession loomed over her daily existence. In September 2018, Javier, who once again tried to contact Valyria, said that he accidentally used her bank card for an online purchase and wanted to return the money urgently. On the surface, it seemed like an innocent misunderstanding, something easily resolved. Yet something about his tone and timing unsettled Valyria. She confided in her mother, expressing her apprehensions. Her instincts screamed that something was amiss, but her compassionate nature, always seeking to mend conflicts amicably, won out. She decided to meet him, perhaps hoping to put an end to their lingering connection once and for all. Most likely, Javier's story about the bank card was nothing more than a pretext, a poorly veiled excuse to see Valyria one last time. She understood this deep down, but direct confrontation felt overwhelming. Instead, she confided in a close friend, sharing her concerns and fears. Together, they devised a plan. The friend would confront Javier on Valyria's behalf and firmly demand that he cease all contact. To their relief, the strategy seemed to work. The incessant phone calls and messages, which had become a relentless weight on Valyria's life, stopped abruptly. For the first time in months, she felt the suffocating presence of Javier begin to lift. A sense of peace, though tentative, returned to her life. Valyria began to rediscover small joys. She immersed herself in her artwork, found solace in the bookstore where she worked, and reconnected with the warmth of her family. Yet, unbeknownst to her, Javier's obsessive nature had not subsided. It had simply retreated into the shadows, festering and growing more sinister. On January 24, 2019, he re-emerged with a disturbing twist. He sent a bizarre message to a mutual acquaintance, accusing Valyria of infidelity. His claim, that she had been with another man in his home, was absurd. Valyria hadn't seen or spoken to him in months and was happily exploring a new relationship. This unfounded accusation was not only unsettling, but indicative of his deteriorating mental state. Despite dismissing the incident as another desperate attempt to regain her attention, Valyria couldn't shake the unease it left behind. The following days brought a mix of joy and creeping dread. On January 27, her family gathered to celebrate her father's birthday. The evening was filled with love, laughter, and the comforting normalcy of family life. Valyria, surrounded by those who loved her most, seemed to momentarily cast aside her worries. Yet this fleeting peace was not to last. The next evening, after finishing her shift at the bookstore, Valyria called her mother in a state of utter panic. Her voice, usually calm and melodic, was now frantic and broken by sobs. She confessed that she felt stalked, convinced that someone was watching her and intent on causing her harm. Her fears had reached a crescendo, amplified by recent media coverage of violent crimes against women. Desperate to comfort her daughter, Valyria's mother pressed her for details. Was there a name? A specific person she feared? Valyria's answers were vague, her terror too overwhelming for clarity. She spoke of shadows, of an ever-present dread that followed her everywhere. After a long and tearful conversation, her mother managed to calm her down. They agreed that she would come to stay with Valyria the next day to provide comfort and security. Before going to bed, Valyria sent a final message. "I'm calm now, going to bed." These simple words would be the last her family would ever hear from her. The morning of January 29th began with a growing sense of unease. Valyria's mother tried repeatedly to contact her, but her calls went unanswered. Each voicemail message that played back heightened her worry. Valyria was known for her punctuality and reliability. An unannounced absence was entirely out of character. By mid-morning, the family's concern turned to outright fear. Her employer, too, noted her absence and contacted the family. Every unanswered call, every silent moment felt like an eternity, and the echoes of her recent panic only deepened their anxiety. On January 29, unable to bear the suspense, Valyria's family went to her apartment. What they found chilled them to the core. Her home was eerily undisturbed. There were no signs of a struggle, no indication of forced entry, yet the silence was deafening. One small detail caught their attention: a faint bloodstain on a pillowcase in the bathroom. Though it could have been from something minor, a nosebleed or a small injury, its presence in an otherwise pristine apartment felt deeply unsettling. When the family reported Valyria missing, the police quickly turned their attention to Javier. The obsessive ex-boyfriend, with a history of harassment and controlling behavior, became the prime suspect. As the hours stretched into days, the investigators tasked with unraveling the mystery of Valyria Reyes' disappearance found themselves caught in a whirlwind of clues, suspicions, and dead ends. They meticulously pieced together a timeline by reaching out to her friends, family, and co-workers, each conversation adding fragments to an increasingly sinister picture. Valyria's family clung to hope as they answered the officers' probing questions, recalling her warmth, ambition, and laughter through tears. Yet beneath their hope was a growing dread, one that whispered that their beloved daughter and sister might never return. Meanwhile, the weight of suspicion on Javier, her ex-boyfriend, grew heavier with each passing day. His erratic behavior and history of obsessive harassment painted a troubling picture of a man who could not accept the end of their relationship. When approached by investigators, Javier's evasive responses and refusal to cooperate fully only deepened the suspicion. He remained elusive, his actions raising more questions than answers. For Valyria's loved ones, the days became an unbearable cycle of searching, waiting, and grieving for a life not yet confirmed lost. They remembered her effervescent personality, her dreams of becoming a tattoo artist, and her love for books and art. The absence of answers left them grappling with the tormenting reality that somewhere out there, someone held the truth. A truth that remained hidden in shadows as their pain deepened. The unfolding investigation revealed chilling details, casting an even darker light on Valyria's disappearance. Detectives uncovered a timeline marked by disturbing events. Data from her mobile provider showed that Valyria's phone was switched to airplane mode on January 28th at 3:10 a.m., a detail that was troubling in itself. What followed, however, was even more unsettling. Her cloud storage was accessed, and someone combed through her photos, videos, and messages. This suggested an attempt to either erase evidence or find something specific, though what they sought remained unclear. The timeline took an even darker turn when a withdrawal of $1,000 was made from Valyria's bank account at 5:20 a.m. on January 29th, just 2 hours after her phone had gone dark. Surveillance footage from the ATM captured a man arriving in a black Honda, withdrawing the cash and leaving swiftly. Valyria was not with him. The car's license plate provided a significant lead. It was registered to none other than Javier. Already under suspicion for his obsessive behavior, this new detail placed him firmly in the spotlight. As the investigation deepened, the evidence against Javier mounted. Surveillance footage from January 28th showed him leaving his home in the black Honda late at night, heading toward Valyria's apartment. Investigators questioned why he would be in her neighborhood at such an odd hour, especially since her phone logs revealed no recent communication with him. Valyria had not reached out to him in months, making any visit from him uninvited and suspicious. Further troubling details emerged. Javier's phone had been turned off for long periods during the critical hours of Valyria's disappearance, making it difficult for investigators to track his movements. When it finally pinged back on, it placed him near Harrison, Connecticut at 6:10 a.m., then near Greenwich at 7:30 a.m., before eventually reappearing in Queens at 9:45 a.m. Surveillance cameras confirmed his arrival home, where he was seen wearing different clothes than he had worn the night before. Additionally, he was captured carrying a small sports bag into his house, only to emerge moments later without it. These actions, combined with his uncooperative demeanor, painted a picture of guilt that detectives could not ignore. Adding a bizarre layer to the case, Javier posted an old photo of himself with Valyria on Instagram the night before her disappearance. The post's timing and intent baffled investigators. Was it an attempt to create a false narrative, to imply they were still together, or perhaps a veiled message directed at someone else? The detectives could only speculate, unable to derive concrete answers from this cryptic act. While the police worked tirelessly to unravel the truth, Valyria's family refused to sit idly by. They launched their own search, plastering posters of her face across neighborhoods, questioning anyone who might have seen or heard anything. Her closest friends retraced her usual routes: visited her favorite spots, and reached out to her broader circle for information. Yet, as days turned into weeks, their efforts yielded no breakthroughs. The gnawing dread that something terrible had happened grew heavier with each passing moment. On February 5th, that dread crystallized into heartbreaking reality. Highway workers performing a routine patrol stumbled upon a bright red suitcase abandoned by the roadside. Its vibrant color stood out against the dull surroundings, and something about its placement seemed deliberate, almost ominous. When they unzipped the suitcase, they were met with a sight so horrific that they immediately called the authorities. Inside the suitcase lay the mutilated corpse of a young woman. Her hands and feet were tightly bound with rope, and her mouth was sealed shut with multiple layers of duct tape. Her clothing was shredded and filthy, and she was barefoot. A prominent, gruesome wound on her head stood out amidst the signs of violence, indicating that she had endured a savage assault. The body was quickly identified as Valyria Reyes. Despite the horrifying condition of her remains, her parents, though shattered with grief, confirmed her identity. The discovery extinguished any remaining hopes of Valyria's safe return. The examination of her body not only revealed the severity of her injuries, but also highlighted the malicious intent of her murderer. The state of the suitcase and its contents suggested a calculated effort to hide her remains. Investigators hypothesized that her body had been transported and discarded in a manner intended to prevent its discovery. This heartbreaking revelation injected a renewed urgency into the investigation. Javier's connection to the crime became increasingly clear, yet direct evidence tying him to Valyria's murder remained elusive. As the investigation progressed, Valyria's family and community mourned the loss of a vibrant, kind-hearted young woman whose life had been brutally and senselessly taken. Candlelit vigils were held in her memory, with friends and family sharing stories of her kindness, creativity, and aspirations for the future. Their sorrow was deepened by the unanswered questions surrounding her death, and their only comfort was the hope that justice would ultimately be served. The red suitcase became a powerful symbol of unimaginable tragedy. Its image seared into the memories of everyone involved. It stood as a stark reminder of the violence that had taken Valyria's life, and the relentless effort required to uncover the truth. For Valyria's family, nothing short of complete justice would be acceptable. Justice for the daughter, sister, and friend they had cherished and lost. During the autopsy, the full horror of Valyria's final moments was revealed. A devastating blow to the head with a blunt object had incapacitated her, but was not immediately fatal. Evidence suggested that she was still alive when she was forced into the confined space of the suitcase. The cramped, airless environment became her final resting place, and she ultimately died from asphyxiation after enduring unimaginable pain. Her death was neither swift nor merciful. It was marked by the agony of slow suffocation and the despair of being abandoned to die alone. All evidence pointed to Javier Dilva as the perpetrator, yet proving his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt was challenging. The most incriminating piece of evidence was Valyria's bank card, discovered tucked inside his wallet. During his interrogation, Javier provided a feeble and suspicious explanation. He claimed to have found Valyria's card and ID at a bar, a story filled with inconsistencies that only heightened the investigators' suspicions. As detectives presented the case against him, showing surveillance footage, tracking his car's movements, and analyzing phone records, Javier's composure began to falter. Faced with evidence placing him near Valyria's home on the night she disappeared, his story shifted. He admitted that he might have visited her apartment but insisted he was too intoxicated to remember. The turning point came when detectives showed him graphic photographs of Valyria's body in the suitcase. Javier broke down, crying uncontrollably, and spun a tangled and contradictory narrative. In his revised account, Javier claimed that Valyria had invited him over that evening, and they had engaged in consensual but rough sexual activity. He alleged that during the encounter, Valyria had fallen, hitting her head on the floor and losing consciousness. Panicked, Javier asserted that he tried to save her by performing CPR and chest compressions, but failed. Terrified of being accused of murder, he attempted to cover up the incident. He tied her up, gagged her, and placed her in the suitcase before driving out of town to dispose of her body. When questioned about why he had bound and gagged an already unconscious or possibly deceased woman, Javier hesitated. He could not explain these actions. He also stated that he intentionally used Valyria's bank card to attract attention to himself, believing that this would speed up the investigation and clear his name. This claim lost credibility when it was discovered that he had withdrawn an additional $4,350 from her account in the days that followed. Searches of his home revealed Valyria's phone and laptop, which he had taken and unsuccessfully attempted to destroy by submerging them in a river. For reasons unknown, he later retrieved these items, further complicating his already dubious narrative. As the investigation delved deeper into the lives of both Valyria and Javier, hidden facets of their relationship began to surface, painting a more complex picture of the events leading up to the tragedy. Valyria Reyes was not only a beloved daughter and friend, but also an emerging artist with a promising career. Her work had recently gained attention for its emotional depth and raw portrayal of personal struggles, hinting at a level of vulnerability that few knew about. Friends revealed that Valyria had been dealing with anxiety and stress, though nothing suggested she was in immediate danger. Javier Dilva, on the other hand, was a figure shrouded in mystery. To those who knew him, he appeared charming and charismatic, often involved in community events and local gatherings. However, as investigators sifted through his background, unsettling details began to emerge. There were whispers of past altercations and an underlying anger that seemed to simmer beneath his affable exterior. Financial records showed inconsistencies that suggested Javier might have been under significant financial strain, potentially providing a motive linked to Valyria's bank account withdrawals. The psychological profile of Javier became a focal point of the investigation. Experts were brought in to analyze his behavior, both during the initial interactions and the subsequent unraveling of his story. Patterns of manipulation, a tendency to create false narratives, and signs of deep-seated insecurity were evident. This profile helped detectives understand the possible motivations and mental state that could drive someone to commit such a horrific act. Meanwhile, Valyria's digital footprint provided crucial clues. Her cloud storage, which Javier had accessed, contained not only personal photos and documents, but also encrypted files that hinted at a secret she had been keeping. Investigators worked tirelessly to decrypt these files, believing they might hold the key to understanding Valyria's life and any potential threats she might have faced. The contents suggested that Valyria had been in contact with someone she referred to only as A, whose identity remained unknown. This revelation opened new avenues for the investigation, prompting detectives to explore Valyria's recent interactions and any possible enemies or sources of conflict. As the investigation drew closer to uncovering the truth, the tension in the community was palpable. Media coverage intensified, bringing both scrutiny and support. Law enforcement agencies coordinated with national databases to track Javier's movements and connections, ensuring that no stone was left unturned. Advances in forensic technology played a significant role in analyzing the evidence, providing clearer insights into the sequence of events and Javier's actions. The investigation uncovered that Javier had accessed Valyria's cloud storage by utilizing her fingerprint, an action he took after her death. Through this unauthorized access, he obtained detailed information about her financial situation, which he subsequently exploited for his gain. Detectives found this methodical maneuver deeply unsettling, as it indicated a premeditated desire to manipulate and benefit from her demise. The entire narrative Javier provided was fraught with contradictions, inconsistencies, and highly unlikely coincidences, clearly demonstrating to investigators that his actions were not the frantic errors of an innocent individual. Their doubts were further substantiated when a comprehensive forensic examination of Valyria's body revealed unmistakable evidence of a violent struggle. The presence of bruising patterns and defensive wounds signified that she had actively resisted her attacker. The severity of her injuries did not align with Javier's account of a tragic accident, leading investigators to determine that this was not a crime of passion, but rather a calculated and intentional act of violence. Beneath Valyria's nails, investigators discovered fragments of skin and traces of blood, clear evidence of her desperate struggle for survival. Forensic analysis confirmed that the DNA matched Javier de Silva, the man whose obsession had led to her untimely death. His fingerprints were found on her neck and chest, indicating the brutal fight that had occurred. Additionally, Javier's DNA was present on the suitcase that contained her body, in the vehicle he used to transport it, and on several of her personal items. This physical evidence constructed an irrefutable narrative. This was not a spontaneous act, but a deliberate, premeditated act of violence. The overwhelming evidence culminated in Javier's swift arrest. On February 5, 2020, authorities officially charged him with the brutal murder of 24-year-old Valyria Reyes. Initially, Javier clung to his innocence, steadfastly denying any involvement in her death. However, as the mountain of evidence against him continued to grow, his facade began to crumble, leading him to eventually confess to the heinous crime. By the time the trial commenced, the entire world was riveted, both captivated and horrified by the intricate and chilling details of this tragic case. Throughout the trial, the prosecutor meticulously laid out the facts for the jury, painting Javier as a predator who had meticulously monitored Valyria's every move. What began as an obsessive infatuation had devolved into a cold-blooded murder. The prosecutor detailed how Javier's actions demonstrated clear intent and premeditation, from the moment he accessed Valyria's cloud storage to gain intimate knowledge of her financial situation, to the eventual withdrawal of funds from her account, and ultimately, the disposal of her body in the red suitcase. Each step of his plan was executed with chilling precision, leaving little doubt about his malicious intent. Valyria's family and friends were present at every court session, their unwavering presence a testament to their determination to see justice served. Her mother's testimony was particularly heart-wrenching. Struggling to speak through her tears, she confronted Javier directly, branding him a monster devoid of any humanity. Her grief was palpable, each word she uttered reflecting the immense pain and anguish felt by everyone who had loved Valyria. She spoke of her daughter's dreams, her inherent kindness, and the unbearable sorrow of knowing that Valyria's life had been extinguished in such a horrifying manner.
My daughter did not deserve whatever you did to her. My daughter was pure.
In contrast, Javier's defense team endeavored to mitigate his culpability by presenting a narrative aimed at humanizing him. They depicted Javier as a man burdened by a difficult childhood, grappling with depression following his breakup with Valyria, and influenced by substance abuse on the night of the crime. Letters from old friends in Venezuela were introduced, portraying Javier as once a sensitive and decent individual who had unfortunately lost his way. Despite these attempts to elicit empathy, the defense's arguments failed to sway the jury. The evidence against Javier was overwhelmingly damning, and the nature of the crime was too atrocious to be overshadowed by his personal struggles. On September 3, 2021, after an exhaustive and emotionally charged trial, the court delivered its verdict. Javier de Silva was sentenced to 30 years in prison. At 28 years old, this sentence meant that Javier would spend the majority of his life behind bars. Additionally, the court addressed another critical aspect of Javier's situation, his illegal status in the United States. It was revealed that Javier had overstayed his visa, which had expired in August 2017, rendering his stay in the country unlawful. Consequently, it was decided that after serving his sentence, he would be deported back to Venezuela, where he might face further legal repercussions for his actions. The narrative of Lauren Hiky, a spirited 29-year-old from Phoenix, Arizona, stands as a moving testament to the delicate nature of our lives and the rapidity with which circumstances can alter our existence. Lauren, a radiant individual with mesmerizing green eyes, possessed an unshakable belief in the inherent goodness of those around her. Unbeknownst to her, this trust and openness would ultimately culminate in her untimely and tragic end. Born on November 20, 1993, in Seattle, Washington, Lauren Hiky entered the world into a prosperous family. Her father, Jeff, was the proprietor of a plumbing manufacturing enterprise, while her mother, Lana, pursued a career in real estate. Lauren shared a close bond with her older brother, Ryan, fostering a strong sense of family camaraderie from an early age. She pursued her secondary education at Central Kitsap High School in Silverdale, Washington, where she excelled academically and socially. Upon graduating, Lauren made the significant decision to relocate to Phoenix, Arizona, where she enrolled at the Gary Manuel Leda Institute. There, she honed her skills to become a cosmetologist and skincare specialist, leveraging her innate understanding of cosmetics and her dedication to self-care. This education not only enhanced her natural talents, but also paved the way for a promising career in the beauty industry. Lauren embarked on her professional journey at 18, laying a solid foundation for her future endeavors. Initially, she served as a customer support representative for 5 years, starting in 2015. Her dedication and expertise led her to become a leading manager at the esteemed cosmetics company, Benefit. Following this role, she transitioned to working as a cosmetologist at a beauty salon for 9 months, further expanding her experience and reputation in the field. In October 2020, Lauren advanced to the position of manager at the Center for Aesthetic Medicine, simultaneously nurturing aspirations to enter the real estate sector, inspired by her mother's career path. At the time of the tragedy, Lauren was employed full-time as an instructor at a golf club. Known for her fearlessness in the face of challenges, she was responsible, personable, and adept at connecting with others. Her active involvement in the beauty industry, sports, and real estate highlighted her multifaceted interests and drive for personal growth. Lauren maintained rigorous attention to her physical fitness, regularly engaging in exercise and leading a healthy, active lifestyle. She was surrounded by a network of friends and enjoyed unwavering support from her family. Lauren cherished her leisure time, dedicating it to productive activities such as work, sports, socializing with friends, traveling, and hiking. The allure of Phoenix's scenic trails was a particular source of joy for her, providing a serene escape where she could walk alone, immerse herself in music, and appreciate the beauty of nature, fresh air, and the tranquility of her surroundings. Her preferred route was a secluded path in the northern part of the city, close to her apartment, a place where solitude was abundant and companionship rare. Understandably, Lauren's parents were deeply concerned about her solitary walks in such deserted areas. Despite their worries, Lauren remained confident in her safety, believing wholeheartedly that nothing adverse could befall her. Each morning, she began her day with gratitude, savoring a cup of coffee, engaging in conversations with loved ones and friends, and then embarking on her daily walk. This routine was a cherished ritual, one that infused her mornings with positivity and set a hopeful tone for the day ahead. Tragically, Lauren did not anticipate that her trusting nature and carefree disposition could become factors in her fatal demise. On April 28, 2023, her morning unfolded just as it always did. She enjoyed her coffee, conversed with family and friends over the phone, and set out for her routine walk in the northern district of Phoenix, not far from her residence. The route she chose meandered through a picturesque trail in a calm, quiet, and sparsely populated area, typically taking her 15 to 30 minutes one way. She departed her home around 10:30 a.m., and the last footage captured by surveillance cameras showed her walking peacefully along the trail at approximately 10:52 a.m. On that day, she was dressed in a pink sports top, black leggings, and sneakers, carrying only her phone and keys. No one saw Lauren alive again. She was scheduled to arrive at work by 11:30 but failed to show up, and she did not provide any notice regarding her delay or absence. This was highly unusual for someone as responsible as Lauren. Her colleagues began calling her, but there was no response. Lauren's phone had been turned off. Concerned friends started inundating social networks with messages and making frantic calls to one another, hoping someone might have information about Lauren's whereabouts. However, no one had seen her since she left her house that morning. Around 1:10 in the afternoon, Lauren's worried parents, unable to reach her through any means, made their way to her apartment. They hoped that perhaps their daughter was feeling unwell and decided not to go to work. However, Lauren was not at home either, despite her belongings remaining untouched. The doors were locked, and there were no signs of a robbery or a struggle. It appeared as though Lauren had simply gone for a walk and had not returned. Immediately after this discovery, the family filed a missing person report with the police. Law enforcement officers responded swiftly and initiated searches, but the results were not immediate. On April 28th, the weather was sunny and warm, typical for the area, but the park where Lauren often walked was sparsely populated. Had someone been present at the time of the attack, the tragedy might have been prevented, but that was not the case. Lauren was last seen alone on her way to the park, after which she disappeared and stopped answering calls. Throughout the day, police and volunteers conducted thorough surveys of the surrounding area and the park, seeking any potential witnesses. They meticulously combed every corner and bush, but their efforts did not bear fruit. Loved ones held onto the hope that Lauren might have simply wandered off, become delayed, or perhaps visited friends in another part of the city. Relatives continuously attempted to reach out to her through calls and messages, but there was no indication of her whereabouts. As each hour passed, their hopes dwindled, and fears for Lauren's safety intensified. Her parents, brother, and friends were left in a state of turmoil, feeling as though they were trapped in a horrifying nightmare. The following morning, April 29th, at approximately 11:10, the worst fears were realized. Lauren's body was discovered by a woman walking her dog, a passerby who frequently saw Lauren on that route and immediately recognized her. As the dog began to investigate the bushes near the trail, the woman uncovered Lauren's lifeless body. Without hesitation, she called the police.
Phoenix 911, where is your emergency?
Oh, I just found a woman's body out in the desert, and I was just going for a walk, and she's there. I didn't touch her, I didn't do anything, but it looks like she's been there for a while.
When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, they were met with a harrowing sight. Lauren lay face up in the thicket, her arms outstretched, clothes torn, and her body covered in numerous stab wounds. Blood was scattered across the area, painting a grim picture of the violence that had occurred. Forensic experts were promptly dispatched to the scene. The medical examiner concluded that Lauren had died on April 28th at around 11:10 a.m., succumbing to blood loss from deep knife wounds. A total of 15 stab wounds were discovered on her body, likely inflicted with a pocket knife. A fatal wound was identified in her back. The varying depths and shapes of the wounds suggested that the attack and subsequent murder had been prolonged, indicating a fierce struggle. Injuries on Lauren's hands revealed that she had resisted, with deep cuts on both sides as she attempted to grasp and deflect the sharp knife. It became clear to the police that Lauren had fought valiantly until her last moments, but her attacker was both aggressive and physically strong. The nature of the wounds suggested that the assault had been unexpected. Scratches on her back and shoulders, along with her torn clothing, indicated that the assailant had attacked from behind, knocking her to the ground before beginning to stab her. The attacker then turned her over and continued the assault. At the crime scene, a distinct footprint from a size 42 to 43 sneaker was found, likely belonging to the perpetrator. An examination of the area showed that during the struggle, Lauren had tried to crawl away, escape, and hide among the bushes, but to no avail. Blood traces extended several meters and ended abruptly near her body. Despite her desperate attempts to survive and call for help, the deserted park lacked witnesses who could come to her aid. As the investigation progressed, detectives delved deeper into Lauren's life, seeking to understand if there were any possible motives or suspects. They reviewed her recent activities, communications, and relationships, looking for any signs of conflict or threats. Friends and family were interviewed extensively, each providing pieces of the puzzle that might lead to the perpetrator. The community was shaken by the brutality of the crime, leading to increased awareness and discussions about safety, especially for individuals who enjoyed solitary activities like Lauren. The case garnered significant media attention, bringing to light the vulnerabilities that even the most cautious individuals can face. Community leaders organized vigils and support groups for those affected by Lauren's tragic loss. The local police department increased patrols in the area, aiming to prevent such incidents in the future and to reassure the public. Meanwhile, forensic teams worked tirelessly to analyze the evidence, hoping to piece together the events that led to Lauren's untimely death. Not far from the location where Lauren's body was discovered, mere meters away, investigators uncovered a barbed wire fence that appeared to have been the site of a desperate struggle. Lauren had evidently attempted to climb over this barrier in her bid to escape, as evidenced by pieces of her torn clothing and traces of her blood lingering on the wire. Forensic experts surmised that her attempt to overcome this obstacle likely resulted in the numerous scratches and abrasions found on her body. In close proximity to the fence, Lauren's personal belongings were located. Her phone and house keys had fallen out of her pockets during the violent altercation. Notably absent were her wallet and other valuables, leading authorities to swiftly dismiss the possibility of robbery as a motive. Upon further examination, it was revealed that Lauren's phone had been damaged. The last recorded calls were made on the evening of April 27th, indicating that no one had heard from her for over a day. As investigators continued to scrutinize the area, forensic specialists made another significant discovery: a bloody pocket knife lying among the branches a few meters from the crime scene. Experts immediately identified this as the probable murder weapon. A meticulous examination of the knife's blade and handle uncovered fingerprints and other DNA traces belonging to an unidentified man. Additionally, hair and epithelial cells of the assailant were collected at the scene, providing critical evidence for the ongoing investigation. Lauren's body, along with all the recovered physical evidence, was promptly sent for comprehensive forensic analysis. Meanwhile, investigators turned their attention to surveillance camera footage from the park. One of the cameras had captured Lauren entering the park at 10:52 a.m., walking alone while listening to music on her headphones. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. However, just a minute later, the image of a tall, thin man dressed in dark clothing briefly appeared on the recording. The man hurriedly ran past the camera, seemingly attempting to conceal his face. Despite the fleeting glimpse, experts were able to determine that the individual was a young African-American man wearing a cap. His height, build, skin color, and clothing matched the description of the person whose traces were found at the crime scene. Another camera located at the park's exit captured the same man dashing out from around a corner at 10:57 a.m. He was seen desperately trying to climb over the fence, but became entangled in his clothing, ultimately managing to jump over the barrier while losing his cap in the process. These surveillance records provided the investigation with its first tangible lead, although the perpetrator's identity remained elusive. The police now possessed a detailed description and distinguishing features of the suspect they were seeking. Importantly, the timeline of the man's appearance in the park aligned precisely with the estimated time of Lauren's murder. Frame-by-frame analysis of the footage revealed additional insights. The suspect was moving with clear intent and urgency, frequently glancing around as if fearful of being noticed. Notably, he entered the park roughly 30 to 40 seconds after Lauren, suggesting he may have been following her. After committing the crime, he fled in the opposite direction of the park's entrance, scaling the fence in a hurried attempt to vanish without a trace. These observations supported the theory that the murder was premeditated and possibly not the assailant's first offense. Despite his calculated efforts to evade capture, the perpetrator's haste led to mistakes that allowed him to be partially captured on camera. The surveillance footage was subsequently shown to Lauren's parents and friends, who, unfortunately, were unable to identify the man in the video. The shocking and heartbreaking nature of the tragedy left everyone deeply affected and mourning the loss of a beloved individual. As the investigation unfolded, detectives delved deeper into the possible motives behind Lauren's murder. They explored various angles, including personal relationships, professional interactions, and any recent conflicts that Lauren might have encountered. Interviews with friends, family members, and colleagues were conducted extensively to piece together a comprehensive picture of her life and identify any potential threats or adversaries. Social media activity and digital footprints were also analyzed to uncover any clues that might lead to the perpetrator's identity. The police continued to work tirelessly, following every lead and cross-referencing the evidence collected. Advanced forensic techniques, including DNA analysis and fingerprint matching, were employed to identify the unknown man seen in the surveillance footage. Collaborative efforts with other law enforcement agencies were also initiated to broaden the search and increase the chances of apprehending the suspect. Relatives found it utterly inconceivable that someone could intentionally and brutally take the life of their kind-hearted, vibrant daughter. Lauren Hiky had no known enemies, no lingering conflicts, and no debts to repay. She possessed no valuable possessions or substantial sums of money, and she led a lifestyle far removed from danger. As a result, the theories of revenge or robbery were promptly dismissed by investigators as plausible motives for her tragic murder. A week following Lauren's untimely death, law enforcement officials organized a press conference to update the public on the progress of the investigation. During this event, police officers meticulously detailed the evidence they had amassed thus far and earnestly appealed to the community for assistance in identifying the suspect responsible for Lauren's death. Standing amidst the gathered crowd, Lauren's father, Jeff Hiky, struggled to contain his emotions. Barely holding back tears, he implored anyone with information to come forward and aid the authorities in their pursuit of justice. In a heartfelt plea, the family announced a substantial monetary reward for any tips that could lead to the apprehension of the killer, hoping that this incentive would encourage individuals with crucial information to step forward. The devastating news of Lauren's murder reverberated throughout the entire city, eliciting a widespread and heartfelt response from its residents. Thousands of people took to social media platforms to share information about the case, amplifying the search efforts and fostering a sense of communal solidarity. Concurrently, forensic teams continued their meticulous work on the physical evidence collected from the crime scene. DNA samples, fingerprints, and other biological traces were carefully analyzed in state-of-the-art laboratories, with experts striving to uncover any leads that could break the case wide open. After exhaustive analysis, the forensic experts experienced a breakthrough. The genetic profile of the suspect matched records in the police database, leading to the identification of Zion William Teasley, a 22-year-old African-American man with a history of criminal activity. Detectives swiftly shifted their focus to building a comprehensive profile of Zion, delving into his background to understand any underlying factors that might have contributed to his involvement in such a heinous crime. Zion's upbringing was marred by significant challenges. He was raised in a dysfunctional household where his parents struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction, creating an unstable and tumultuous environment during his formative years. From an early age, Zion exhibited behavioral issues, frequently clashing with the law through acts of theft, vandalism, and making threats against others. In 2020, his criminal record expanded to include convictions for a series of armed robberies, resulting in nearly a year of incarceration. Demonstrating good behavior, Zion was released early from prison, but his troubles with the law did not end there. In January 2023, he was arrested for a knife attack on a passerby. However, the victim ultimately withdrew the statement, leading to Zion receiving a suspended sentence. At the time of Lauren's murder, Zion was under police supervision and was required to regularly check in at the precinct. His last check-in occurred on April 27th, the day before the tragedy, which raised immediate suspicions among the investigators. Armed with this critical information, detectives formulated a strategic plan to apprehend Zion. They placed him under 24-hour surveillance, monitoring his movements closely. It was discovered that Zion was unemployed and spent most of his time at home, occasionally venturing out to stores or associating with questionable individuals in the neighborhood. With sufficient evidence pointing towards his involvement, the authorities secured an arrest warrant for Zion Teasley. A specialized capture team was dispatched to his apartment, where they had to forcibly break down the door, only to find the residence empty. During the search, the police uncovered a bucket of chlorine, gloves, and rags, suggesting that Zion had attempted to destroy evidence related to the crime. Fortunately, he had not succeeded in eliminating all traces. Additionally, in Zion's room, investigators found a suitcase packed with clothing, a brand new passport under a different name, and bus tickets to Canada, indicating his intention to flee the country to evade justice. Realizing the urgency of the situation, authorities launched a large-scale operation to locate Zion. An alert was disseminated to all states, informing border guards to be on high alert for his apprehension. Enhanced patrols were deployed at railway stations, airports, and major highways to intercept any attempts he might make to escape the jurisdiction. Detectives meticulously examined the calls made from Zion's phone, using cell tower signals to triangulate his location and narrow down his whereabouts. Simultaneously, investigators continued to compile evidence against Zion. They uncovered several eyewitness accounts linking him to Lauren in the days leading up to her murder. One woman reported seeing him standing near Lauren's entrance, seemingly waiting for her, while another man recalled spotting Zion in the same park 2 days prior to the incident. A thorough examination of Zion's history revealed a troubling pattern of aggressive behavior towards women. Just a month before Lauren's death, he had been detained for harassing a girl in a nightclub, and an earlier incident involved a former girlfriend filing a statement against him for physical abuse. Although these cases were previously closed due to insufficient evidence, they now painted a clearer picture of Zion's propensity for violence. By all accounts, Zion was an extremely unbalanced and aggressive individual. He harbored a deep-seated hatred for women, viewing them as inferior beings. His social media profiles were littered with derogatory posts where he directed hateful language towards women, and he had uploaded photos featuring knives that bore a striking resemblance to the murder weapon used in Lauren's case. The police posited that Lauren could have become a random victim of a maniac. Zion may have seen her on the street, stalked her, and then attacked her in a deserted area. Experts suggest that certain aspects of Lauren's appearance or behavior, such as her attractiveness, her approachable demeanor, or her habit of listening to music with headphones, might have provoked his aggression. People with similar psychopathic tendencies often perceive female defenselessness as a justification for their violent actions. Lauren's relatives were devastated by the realization that someone could be so cruel and merciless. Their daughter had simply gone for a walk and was brutally killed without any apparent reason. Lauren's father, in a deeply emotional address to the public, implored everyone to refrain from mob justice and to allow the police the opportunity to punish the criminal according to the law. His heartfelt plea emphasized the importance of a fair judicial process, even in the face of such a senseless and horrifying crime. Finally, 3 days after the commencement of the search, Zion Teasley was apprehended. He had been hiding in an abandoned garage on the outskirts of the city, a dilapidated structure shrouded in shadows and neglect. The police had been meticulously tracking his movements, piecing together his likely hideouts based on his known habits and recent sightings. When the specialized capture team arrived at the garage, they approached with caution, aware of Zion's volatile history and the potential for resistance. As officers attempted to breach the door, Zion, realizing he was cornered, reacted violently. He lunged at the lead officer, a seasoned veteran named Officer Martinez, with unexpected ferocity. The struggle was intense and chaotic. Zion swung a heavy flashlight, striking Officer Martinez in the shoulder, causing a deep gash that bled profusely. Despite his injuries, Officer Martinez remained steadfast, managing to subdue Zion with the assistance of his team. The arrest was fraught with tension, highlighting Zion's desperate attempts to evade capture and his willingness to inflict harm to protect himself. During the interrogation that followed, Zion maintained a defiant demeanor, vehemently denying any involvement in Lauren's murder. He claimed that he had never met Lauren and that he was not present in the park on the day of the murder. His eyes, cold and unyielding, met those of the interrogator without a hint of remorse. However, when confronted with the surveillance footage showing his presence in the park shortly before and after the estimated time of Lauren's death, Zion's facade began to crumble. The undeniable evidence silenced him, and he abruptly demanded the presence of a lawyer, signaling his intent to withdraw from further questioning without legal representation. The prosecutor wasted no time in bringing charges against Zion Teasley for intentional murder and kidnapping. The case against him was bolstered by overwhelming evidence, including video recordings, Lauren's personal items found in the garage, the murder weapon, a knife, and DNA and fingerprints collected from the crime scene. Additionally, the injuries sustained by Officer Martinez during the arrest further illustrated Zion's aggressive and dangerous nature. The court decided to impose a preventive measure in the form of detention without the right to bail, given the severity of the charges, the strength of the evidence, and the potential threat Zion posed to the community. The trial of Zion Teasley began on June 5, 2023, quickly becoming one of the most high-profile cases in the state's history. The entire country closely followed the progress of the hearings, with journalists, activists, and concerned citizens gathering around the courthouse to witness the proceedings of the man responsible for such a horrific murder. Zion was brought into the courtroom in handcuffs, under heavy guard. Dressed in an orange prison robe, he maintained an indifferent expression, starkly contrasting with the emotional turmoil of Lauren's family. Her mother cried continuously, while her father looked at the defendant with visible anger and sorrow. Friends of the deceased, holding photographs of Lauren, were also present, their grief palpable in the courtroom. In his opening statement, the prosecutor sought to convince the jury that Zion Teasley was a cruel and cynical murderer who posed a significant danger to society. He emphasized the audacity of the crime and the substantial amount of evidence against the defendant, portraying Zion as a psychopath who harbored a deep hatred for women and derived pleasure from inflicting pain upon them. He meticulously outlined the timeline of events, the forensic evidence, and Zion's history of violent behavior, painting a comprehensive picture of a man driven by malice and aggression. Conversely, Zion's lawyer endeavored to establish his client's innocence. He questioned the validity of the evidence, suggesting that someone else could have committed the murder. The defense attorney argued that the physical evidence, while compelling, did not irrefutably prove Zion's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. He pointed to potential alternative suspects and gaps in the prosecution's timeline. The lawyer urged the jury not to be swayed by emotions or public pressure, but to base their judgment solely on the facts presented in court. He also highlighted Zion's troubled childhood and the severe mistreatment he endured within his family, attempting to paint a picture of a man shaped by his adverse circumstances rather than one driven by inherent malice. Throughout the trial, dramatic moments unfolded. Key witnesses were called to testify, including the woman who discovered Lauren's body and the police officer who was injured during Zion's arrest. The emotional testimonies of Lauren's family members added a deeply personal and poignant element to the proceedings, underscoring the profound loss and devastation caused by the crime. The prosecution presented the surveillance footage, forensic reports, and digital evidence from Zion's social media profiles, which depicted his aggressive tendencies and hatred towards women. In contrast, the defense brought in character witnesses who spoke to Zion's difficult upbringing and the lack of support he received, attempting to elicit empathy and understanding from the jury. In the months leading up to the trial, law enforcement continued to build their case, ensuring that every piece of evidence was meticulously documented and presented. They conducted numerous mock trials and prepared detailed exhibits to counter any defenses Zion might present. The courtroom became a battleground of wills, with both sides presenting compelling arguments in a bid to sway the jury. The courtroom was often tense, with spectators on edge, awaiting each new development with bated breath. Media coverage was relentless, with live broadcasts and in-depth analyses keeping the public informed and engaged. As the trial progressed, the defense attempted to introduce doubt by questioning the integrity of the forensic evidence and the possibility of contamination during the evidence collection process. They also highlighted the lack of direct eyewitnesses who could conclusively place Zion at the scene during the exact time of the murder. However, the prosecution countered these points by emphasizing the comprehensive nature of their investigation and the multitude of indirect evidence that collectively pointed to Zion's guilt. Jury members, selected through a rigorous process, faced the daunting task of sifting through the mountain of evidence and testimonies to render a fair and just verdict. Currently, Zion William Teasley is charged with first-degree murder. In December 2023, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office filed a motion to apply the death penalty to the defendant, advocating for the highest measure of punishment available under Arizona law for such a grave crime. At this time, there is no evidence to suggest that the attack on Lauren Hiky was anything other than a random act of violence chosen by the perpetrator. Zion Teasley himself continues to deny his involvement in the brutal murder, remaining in custody without the option to post bail. The defendant's next trial is scheduled for October 25th, 2025, and is expected to be one of the most significant trials in Arizona history. A girl who cherished life so deeply and believed unwaveringly in the goodness of people became the victim of a cruel and senseless crime.